Chapter 391, A Secret Encounter. In this world, the lines between right and wrong, good and evil, are often blurred. While some individuals clearly align with one side or the other, there are those who navigate the murky waters in between, embodying shades of gray rather than stark black or white. Blake is one such individual. "I'll come find you at midnight," Blake told Cassandra, handing her a vial of a potion to keep her alert. "If you start feeling sleepy, drink this." Cassandra had begun to understand the complexities of those who lived in the gray. People like Blake were not easily confined by the rigid structures of rules and regulations. To him, rules were more like guidelines, applicable only when they suited his purposes. His clandestine cultivation of forbidden plants in the Room of Requirement at Hogwarts was a testament to this. However, Blake was selective about whom he let into his world. The dangerous flora that thrived in his secret garden was not something he shared with just anyone. So, when Blake mentioned he wanted to share a little secret with her, Cassandra knew she had earned a place of trust in his life. The anticipation of what she might discover that night filled her with excitement. After leaving Worley Manor, Blake returned home, his body demanding rest after the day's exertions. He was abruptly awakened by his pet, Dabao, who tugged at his hair and pointed to a letter that had arrived by owl post during his slumber. The letter piqued Blake's interest with its mention of ruins, sparking his adventurous spirit. "Then let's go tonight," he decided, after a quick meal left by Nagini. As the clock neared midnight, Blake made his way back to Worley Manor. Using the Eye of Truth, he ensured the coast was clear before approaching Cassandra's room. A knock on her door caused a stir inside. Is it Dad?" Cassandra's voice trembled with anxiety, fearing an untimely intervention from her father. "No," came Blake's soft reply from the other side, immediately calming her nerves. Cassandra opened the door with a mixture of excitement and relief, finding Blake standing there with a playful smile. "Although I am not your father, if you insist on calling me that, I can't agree to it twice," he teased. "You're so annoying. Come on in." Cassandra pulled him inside, her actions secretive and swift. "Why didn't you just teleport directly into my room?" she asked, a hint of blush coloring her cheeks. "What if your parents were here?" "It's just a precaution," Blake explained, his words causing Cassandra to blush even deeper. "You make it sound like we're up to something secretive. If you're keen on stealing away for an adventure, it's not entirely off the table," Blake said with a wink, surveying her room. "If you're after excitement, let's embrace it fully." Cassandra, flustered and without a comeback, resorted to playfully pinching Blake, though her efforts were futile against him. "Enough of that. Let's go," Blake said, his tone shifting to one of intrigue. "There's something quite thrilling planned for tonight." Opening a dimensional door with a casual gesture, he turned to Cassandra. "Are you ready?" "Of course," she replied, slipping her wand back into her pocket, her anticipation palpable. With that, Blake and Cassandra stepped through the portal, embarking on an adventure that promised to be anything but ordinary. Noticed Cassandra had changed her attire. Gone was her signature green dress, replaced by a set of smart hunting clothes. Now, she resembled less the image of a young witch and more that of a hunter's daughter. Her long golden hair, which usually flowed freely, was now tied back into a ponytail, giving her an energetic appearance. "You?" Blake stared at her outfit, taken aback. "I have a feeling we might encounter something quite thrilling tonight. So I thought a skirt might not be the most practical choice," Cassandra explained. "I rummaged through my closet, which was filled with dresses, until I found this outfit. I used to wear it when I went hunting with my dad. Does it look all right?" she asked, a hint of nervousness in her voice. "If not, I can change back." "No, Cassandra, it's not the clothes that make someone look good, but the person wearing them," Blake reassured her. "And you look great in anything." Cassandra muttered, glib, under her breath, though she couldn't help feeling pleased by his words. "Your foresight is commendable, Cassandra. Wearing a skirt tonight would indeed have been inconvenient." Blake then handed her a small bag. "It contained some healing potions. You might need them later." Healing potions implied the possibility of injury, which in turn suggested danger. This realization excited Cassandra. Despite not being a Gryffindor, she was no stranger to adventure, evidenced by her willingness to follow Blake into the Forbidden Forest. Blake was pleased with her reaction. If you're not afraid, that's good, he thought. He had decided to expose Cassandra to the darker aspects of the world that night. After all, if she was to accompany him henceforth, she would inevitably encounter such situations. And in doing so, Blake hoped Cassandra could become a valuable ally, much like Vita Rohirrim had been to Grindelwald. While the Whirlies were occupied, Blake had managed to bring Cassandra to the mountaintop base. He led her directly to the central conference room, with which he was evidently familiar. Cassandra followed, her curiosity piqued by her surroundings. I've established an organization. It's called the Fourth Natural Disaster, Blake revealed. An organization? What does it primarily focus on? Cassandra inquired, her interest evident. That depends on what I decide, Blake responded seriously. But for now, the main goal is to continue generating income. He continued, we're not exactly short on funds, but I want to keep the members occupied. They were all part of the Wuchui party before. If they have too much free time, they tend to cause trouble. As they walked, Blake shared more about the organization, making Cassandra wonder, does this mean I'm now a part of this organization? Of course, this is all classified information. If you weren't a member, I'd have to consider more drastic measures to keep it secret, Blake joked, his tone darkening playfully. You're joking, right? Cassandra asked, half in disbelief. Do you think we're the good guys? Blake teased, his laughter echoing ominously. No, Cassandra replied instantly, her demeanor becoming more serious. Realizing the gravity of her association, her smile faded. These were the followers of the first Dark Lord, and the young man before her was his son. By that logic, these were not good people by any standard, perhaps even more dangerous than Voldemort himself. Aha! I was just teasing you. How could I ever think of harming you? Blake said, lightening the mood. You scared me, making me think about such things. Cassandra responded, her voice tinged with relief, yet still carrying a hint of reproach. You mentioned silencing me, not burying me, she pointed out, only for Blake to quickly cover her mouth, realizing his slip of the tongue. Blake confidently declared his thoughts, said what was on my mind. Cassandra remained silent, absorbing the sudden shift in conversation. Okay, no kidding. We're getting there, Blake announced as he opened the door to the conference room and confidently strode in. The room was already filled with people, all members of their group who were preparing for the night's activities. Among them were familiar faces, Old Rip, Agatha, Old Bolton, and Old Bart, who was dressed as Grindelwald. Several other elderly wizards were scattered around the room, engaged in quiet discussions. Good evening, gentlemen, Blake greeted them cheerfully. And ma'am, Agatha quickly added, not to be overlooked. Oh, of course, and ladies. Blake corrected himself, pulling Cassandra from behind him into view. Agatha's eyes sparkled with intrigue upon seeing Cassandra. Hey, boss, where did you find this noble lady? Was she kidnapped? From a pure-blood family. Those families have deep pockets. We could demand a hefty ransom. Cassandra recoiled slightly. I wasn't kidnapped. Blake felt a headache coming on. Agatha, have you ever actually kidnapped anyone before? Ahem, just joking, boss. Agatha chuckled, trying to lighten the mood. Of course, I know she wasn't kidnapped by you, Agatha continued, turning to Cassandra with a warm smile. Because you abducted her, right, Cassandra? You recognize me? Cassandra asked, puzzled. She couldn't recall ever meeting this witch before. Of course, the boss has often mentioned you, describing you as both beautiful and intelligent. Agatha's words made Cassandra's cheeks flush with a mix of embarrassment and pleasure. Ahem, that's an exaggeration, Blake interjected, wondering when he had ever said such things in front of them. Blake noticed Agatha's fondness for Cassandra and decided, Agatha, Cassandra will be under your wing from now on. Please, take good care of her. Agatha was momentarily surprised. She's coming with us? Yes, but I'm not sure if it's safe. The ruins might be dangerous. Agatha expressed her concern for Cassandra's safety. There will definitely be danger, but if there wasn't, what would be the point? Blake reasoned. Cassandra needs to face this eventually. It's better for her to gain some experience now. Flowers in a greenhouse can't withstand the storm. Understanding Blake's intention, Agatha's gaze towards Cassandra softened, filled with a newfound determination. Welcome to our group, Cassandra. Stick with me, and I'll ensure your safety. My name is Agatha. From now on, you can just call me that. We don't have many witches in our organization. Agatha led Cassandra aside, engaging her in a more personal conversation. Meanwhile, Blake turned his attention to old Rip, who handed him a piece of commission paper. "What do you think?" Blake inquired. "I think this looks like a trap," old Rip replied, puffing out a smoke ring from his pipe. "Oh, you mean they plan to ambush us?" "Not exactly. I believe the traps are designed to test our strength," old Rip clarified. Blake nodded in agreement. "I had the same thought. If it were merely ruins, it would be too straightforward. They're testing not only our strength, but our reconnaissance capabilities as well. If we approach these ruins as we would any ordinary ruins, we might suffer significant losses." Old Rip nodded. "What are your plans for tonight?" "Tonight, you'll use the alchemy tools I've provided. I'll accompany you, but I won't take action unless necessary. I won't always be able to be by your side, so I hope these gadgets will give you an edge. Tonight is an excellent opportunity to test them out." Old Rip nodded in agreement. "Then I'll take command tonight. It's also a good chance to test new tactics and alchemy tools." 10 minutes later, the group departed from their mountain base. Old Rip opened the dimensional door, a task he had become adept at since accepting the ring from Blake. Blake had shared with him a portion of the supreme magic, making Old Rip one of his most loyal followers. Blake stood before a large, exaggerated ancient stone gate on an isolated island within the Bermuda archipelago in the North Atlantic. The sight of it made the corners of his mouth twitch slightly in amusement. Agatha, observing the ancient stone door, couldn't hide her bewilderment. "This stone gate looks very old. I can't make sense of these inscriptions." "Boss, can you determine the age of this relic?" she asked. Blake smiled, his eyes scanning the ancient craftsmanship. "Well, from what I can see, it's definitely been here for a while. This stone door looks like it was erected at least last week." "You mean this so-called ancient ruin was only discovered last week?" Agatha asked, her voice laced with surprise. "That's to be expected. Since it's a trap for testing, there's no need for them to go through the trouble of finding a real relic," Blake explained. "But I can't help but feel a little disappointed," Agatha admitted. Blake gently caressed the door of the ancient ruins, his voice soft yet filled with a hint of sarcasm. "These guys didn't even bother to make it look convincing." Chapter 392, A Companion Who Will Always Stand by Your Side. Blake peered through the stone door with the eye of truth, noting its crooked angle. Beyond it lay a long corridor, its origins, whether crafted last week or a natural formation, unclear. However, what was evident were the numerous foes lurking within the ruins, none of whom appeared weak. Their strategic hiding spots suggested a human-arranged test dungeon. Yet, as Blake had mentioned before departing, his purpose was merely to observe, to see if his younger sibling could navigate this challenge. Thus, he chose not to issue any warnings. Old Rip glanced at Blake, signaling the commencement of their operation. A circle of seasoned wizards took up defensive positions. Bolton retrieved a trumpet-shaped device from his pocket, its speaker adorned with a screen that emitted a faint technological glow. Pressing the device against the stone door, he pushed a button and announced, "The stone gate is normal, devoid of magical traces or curses. The traps beyond are mundane, free of enchantments. We can proceed with confidence." "Let's blast it open," Old Lep decided, seeing no need to preserve what wasn't an authentic relic. The wizards aimed their wands, chanting, "Thunderbolt explosion!" The massive stone gate shattered, its fragments partially obstructing the entrance. "Whirlwind, clear the path." A gust swept the debris aside, revealing the cave entrance. Suddenly, dozens of crossbow bolts shot out. Bolton, prepared, deflected the potentially lethal traps with a wave of his wand, declaring, "It's safe to enter." Leading the way, Bolton stepped into the darkness. Blake signaled Cassandra to follow. Surprised by Blake's gesture, Cassandra, trusting him, proceeded after Bolton into the gloom, with Agatha close behind. Observing Blake's demeanor, Old Rip inquired softly, "Are you finding this dull, Blake?" "Not in the slightest. It's just that these so-called ruins are underwhelming," Blake replied. "You can manage without me. With the eye of truth, those lurking enemies stand no chance against you." Blake had quickly realized that the supposed adversaries within the ruins were no match for the seasoned wizards. Had it not been for his desire for Cassandra to gain experience, he might have opted to return home. Yet, this dungeon, with its moderate difficulty, provided an ideal training ground. Thus, Blake had decided to let Cassandra enter second. The outcome was as Blake anticipated. The hidden foes, once discovered, proved no match for the group. Cassandra even managed to incapacitate one with a stunning spell, eager to share her triumph with Blake. However, her excitement turned to shock as Bolton coldly slit the throat of the unconscious assailant. Agatha's comforting hand on her shoulder brought Cassandra back to reality. When facing enemies who seek your life, you cannot afford to be lenient. Hesitation could cost you your life, or worse, the lives of your friends, Agatha advised solemnly. Cassandra recalled the assailant's attempt to ambush Bolton with a killing curse, thwarted only by her timely stunning spell. These adversaries were indeed out for blood. Looking again at the dark wizard now lying lifeless, Cassandra grasped the harsh reality Blake had hinted at, the dark side of their world, where mercy could be a fatal weakness. In this world, "Are you scared?" Blake suddenly asked, his voice coming from behind her. I'm not saying I'm scared, just a little uncomfortable, Cassandra replied, her brow furrowed in concern. I understand. It would be odd if you felt nothing, Blake said, breaking the silence that followed. But if you want to leave, it's not too late. He stroked her hair gently, a comforting gesture. Regardless of whether you're feeling brave or apprehensive, I like you just the same. So, if you wish to go back, we can leave now, and I'll help you forget the unsettling memories of tonight. I wouldn't force you into anything, he added, his tone sincere. Cassandra reached out, her hand finding Blake's. Despite the warmth of his touch, her hand felt cold. I can handle it, she said with a newfound determination. 20 minutes later, the relic they had been tasked with retrieving was completely cleared out. At the deepest part of the ruins, they found only an ordinary stone platform. Resting on the platform was a card with a line of blood-red words. Congratulations, you passed the test. Old Rip handed the card to Agatha, who nodded and carefully stored it away. The card served as undeniable proof of their success. Emerging from the cave, Cassandra took a deep breath of the salty sea breeze, her pale face gaining a hint of color. Blake, noticing the change, felt a pang of distress. Perhaps he had been too hasty in bringing her here. Cassandra looked up to see the concern etched on Blake's face and managed a weak smile. I understand why you brought me here, she said softly. Do you wish for someone to always stand by your side in the future? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I just want to tell you that I'm glad you chose me for this role, she continued, her understanding of Blake deepening. She realized that Blake might harbor grand ideals unknown to her, ideals that, once pursued, could have a significant impact. It was likely that many of his friends would desert him, or worse, turn against him. In such times, Blake would face profound loneliness. Thus, he sought someone who would remain steadfastly by his side, offering unwavering support to prevent him from becoming truly isolated. And she was the one Blake had chosen. Blake laughed, touched by her insight. How do you know me so well? Actually, I'm just making preparations, in case I have to face something challenging in the future. Of course, if possible, I'd still prefer to be a happy adventurer, he confessed. Blake had never aspired to anything beyond a life of adventure, traveling the world without a care. However, the knowledge that he would one day travel through time and engage in significant acts across various historical periods had made him cautious. He sensed that he might encounter situations in the future that would compel him to change his course, to take risks, and perform incredible deeds during his time travels. Chapter 393, Grindelwald's Birthday Gift. Blake was not in need of money. Even if the seasoned wizards at the mountaintop base chose not to work, he could still support them comfortably. However, as he had previously discussed with Cassandra, it was crucial to keep these experienced wizards engaged. Idleness could lead to mischief. Consequently, Blake instructed Old Rep to dispatch them on various missions, with the Chaos Wish Commission being a prime example. It was challenging, offered substantial rewards, and required that upon completion, the earnings be split between the organization and the individuals at a ratio of 1:9, with the larger share going to the individuals. This arrangement was met with enthusiasm by the wizards. The prospect of dividends was of little concern to them since they received a regular salary. They much preferred having tasks to occupy their time over languishing in idleness. These individuals thrived on the thrill of adventure rather than the tranquility of retirement. To maintain the organization's aura of mystery and minimize public exposure, all commissions were to be retrieved by designated personnel. As the organization began to mobilize and generate income, Blake celebrated his 13th birthday in the comfort of his home in Godric Valley. He noticed that his physical strength far surpassed that of an average boy his age, a trait he realized was not solely attributable to his Gandalf template. This led him to speculate that his future self might possess unique enhancements within his bloodline, prompting him to consider seeking out beneficial elements to incorporate into his genetic makeup before embarking on time travel. Blake's birthday was marked by an array of gifts. Dumbledore made a point of returning home for the occasion, and even Grindelwald, under the guise of Old Bart, reverted to his true form to visit Godric Valley. However, his stay was cut short due to a near altercation with Aberforth and the impending arrival of Newt, whose interference in Grindelwald's plans had become a source of irritation. As the evening drew to a close and the guests departed, Blake bid Dumbledore good night and retreated to his room, where he was greeted by a mountain of presents. Overwhelmed by the sheer volume of gifts, which included offerings from admirers at Hogwarts, he decided to focus on opening those from people he knew well, opting for the genuine surprise of discovering each item without using magic to peek inside. The first gift Blake chose to open was from Dumbledore, a long, somewhat heavy box. Upon removing the wrapping paper and opening the box, Blake was taken aback. Inside was the Gryffindor sword he had once pulled from the sorting hat, accompanied by a note from Dumbledore. "Keep it. You may need it later." Blake, holding the exquisite sword, couldn't help but feel a mix of awe and amusement at Dumbledore's choice of gift. It was a reminder of the adventures that lay ahead and the legacy he was part of. Blake examined the sword once more, noticing that the blade emitted a faint green glow. A hiss escaped his lips as he realized Dumbledore had imbued the sword with basilisk venom. This meant that, under a peculiar set of circumstances, the sword had absorbed the properties of the basilisk's poison. Reflecting on this, Blake remembered returning Voldemort's Horcruxes, the diary and the diadem, to Dumbledore. The remnants of Voldemort's soul within them had already been eradicated by Blake, rendering their destruction inconsequential. Setting Gryffindor's sword aside on the table, Blake turned his attention to Grindelwald's gift, a seemingly ordinary, lightweight box. Upon opening it, he found nothing but a folded piece of parchment inside. Unfolding the parchment on his bed to view it in its entirety, Blake discovered it was not just any map, but a detailed map of the world adorned with numerous red dots and traces of obscure magical flows. Curiosity piqued, Blake touched one of the red dots, and the map responded by zooming in on that location, much like a modern smartphone, e-map. The red dot pinpointed a location in Scotland, and upon enlargement, the details became crystal clear. Beside the dot, a caption read, "Ancient Relic Number 357, recorded in the summer of 1929. It dawned on Blake that this was a map marking the locations of ancient ruins worldwide, a gift from Grindelwald, who must have remembered Blake's expressed interest in such ruins. With a sense of satisfaction, Blake admired the map's detailed markings. "Now, this will keep me from boredom in the future," he mused, feeling a warmth in his heart. Despite Grindelwald's notorious reputation, this thoughtful gesture showed a different side to him. Blake acknowledged Dumbledore's care as well, though he lamented the lack of time Dumbledore could spend with him. Between the two gifts, Grindelwald's map held a special allure for Blake, sparking his curiosity about the potential ruins near Hogwarts. As Blake pondered over the map, the sound of a dimensional door opening caught his attention. He turned to see Cassandra peeking through a small portal into his room. "Come in, there's no one else here," Blake invited, casting a spell to ensure their privacy from Dumbledore's potential nocturnal awakenings. Cassandra, with a mischievous smile, widened the portal and stepped through. Didn't I tell you not to teleport to me? Blake inquired with a hint of confusion. Well, I wasn't exactly targeting you. I just teleported to your room, assuming you'd be here, Cassandra explained, approaching with a tray laden with Blake's favorite drinks and an assortment of desserts. Blake blinked, momentarily taken aback by the unexpected treat. Blake realized he had been somewhat careless. It never crossed his mind that Cassandra, with her cleverness, would directly make her way to his room, effectively bypassing the restrictions he had set. Not next time, Cassandra said, her voice tinged with a hint of grievance. Why? I just wanted to see you. Blake responded gently. I'm concerned about your safety, Cassandra. You're already aware of some of my secrets, and sometimes he paused, searching for the right words. Sometimes I'm not even sure of the dangers I'm dealing with myself. I worry that if you were to come here without caution, you might find yourself in a perilous situation. If I were unable to rescue you in time, I'd never forgive myself. Cassandra, slightly annoyed, placed the serving tray down and retorted, Well, you always have an excuse. She huffed, I bet you're just trying to keep me away so I won't catch you with another woman. In a swift motion, Blake pulled Cassandra onto his lap, a playful smile on his face. Naughty, do you really think I'm worried about you catching me? No, I'm more concerned about others seeing you and getting the wrong idea. Cassandra, caught off guard, stomped on Blake's foot in frustration. However, Blake, with his quick reflexes, caught her legs and positioned her to sit across his lap, effectively immobilizing her. The sudden closeness made Cassandra's cheeks flush with embarrassment. You? Let me go, she demanded. Okay, but you can't step on my shoes. These were a gift from Mrs. Marion. I can't have you damaging them, Blake said, carefully inspecting his shoes for any signs of damage. Upon hearing that the shoes were a gift from Lady Marion, Cassandra ceased her attempts to step on them, knowing well the significance of Lady Marion in Blake's life. Yet, she couldn't hide her disappointment. You don't even bother to sweet-talk me anymore. Before, you would have at least tried to smooth things over, but now you don't even bother. Blake gently ran his fingers through Cassandra's long golden hair, his smile tender. That's because I no longer have secrets to keep from you. But perhaps not everything I say is the complete truth, he admitted, his tone playful yet sincere. Cassandra felt a mix of happiness and confusion at his words. Before she could ponder further, Blake skillfully changed the subject, pulling out a map. Look at this. With this map, I can easily locate ancient ruins and embark on new explorations. Cassandra's eyes sparkled with interest as she examined the map. This is incredible. Who gave it to you? My father, Blake replied. Which one? Cassandra asked, curiosity piqued. The very, very bad one, Blake said with a hint of humor. Sitting cross-legged on the carpeted floor, Blake invited Cassandra to join him in opening birthday presents. Would you like to open your birthday presents with me? Okay, Cassandra, momentarily distracted from her earlier frustrations, was thrilled at the prospect. Blake had chosen her to open gifts with him, excluding even Granger and the other girls from this intimate moment. Let's start with the gift from Dear Miss Worley, Blake suggested, rummaging through the pile of gifts until he found Cassandra's. Her face betrayed her nervousness. I think you'll like it. I hope, she said, her confidence wavering. Blake's curiosity was instantly piqued. With swift movements, he unwrapped the package to reveal a velvet-lined gift box. Inside, a peculiar fruit, the size of a fist, was nestled securely. Blake carefully lifted the fruit, examining it closely as Cassandra watched his reaction anxiously. This is the seed of an umbrella flower? Blake began, his interest clearly piqued. No, wait. He held the seed up to the light, his eyes widening in realization. This is a hybrid magical plant seed. He listed the magical properties it contained, a mix of poisonous tentacles, jumping bulbs, bubble pods, king's-biting vines, and poison-toothed geraniums. Incredible. It even has characteristics of a devil's net. Before Blake could continue, Cassandra's expression was one of sheer astonishment. You identified all the hybrids just by looking at them. Blake met her gaze, his expression serious yet filled with admiration. These are just minor details, but what truly matters is... Did you cultivate this seed yourself? Cassandra nodded, her voice tinged with a mix of pride and uncertainty. I followed your notes and nurtured it myself. I've been quietly tending to it at home for a long time. Isn't it a failure, though? She added, her confidence waning. It combines the characteristics of so many plants, yet I'm at a loss as to what this plant's purpose could be. Blake set the seed aside, his excitement palpable as he grasped Cassandra's shoulders. You are a genius, Cassandra, he exclaimed, his eyes shining with admiration. Me? A genius? Cassandra's voice was a mix of disbelief and surprise. Absolutely. Not everyone can decipher my notes, let alone bring them to life, Blake continued, his enthusiasm undiminished. But you, merely by studying my notes, have managed to cultivate a completely new magical plant. You've done this without any external assistance, relying solely on your innate talent. We've even successfully harvested seeds that can be replanted. It's clear that your aptitude for herbology is exceptional. Cassandra, still struggling with self-doubt, asked, You're not just praising me to make me feel better, are you? Cassandra, I want you to stop doubting yourself in my presence, Blake said, his tone turning serious. There was a time when you wouldn't have questioned your genius. You were confident, and rightfully so. I want to see that Cassandra again, the one who takes pride in her accomplishments. His words were not just a compliment, but a call to action, urging Cassandra to reclaim the confidence she had lost. Blake's belief in her abilities was unwavering, and he hoped to reignite the spark of self-assurance that once defined her. Chapter 394. Even if the opponent has one vila, or two. Cassandra bit her lip, her voice tinged with uncertainty. But, who can stand proud in front of you? You can't compare with me, Blake said, his tone matter-of-fact. I'm not ordinary. I was created in a laboratory. Perhaps my rather unconventional father implanted something in my brain to enhance it, so you should only compare yourself with those similar to you. Blake couldn't reveal the truth about his system, so he vaguely attributed his abilities to Grindelwald and his own future self. Cassandra, upon hearing Blake's explanation, found it logical. It was akin to how humans couldn't outpace computers in computational speed. She realized she couldn't compete with Blake, who was more than human. This realization helped Cassandra's bruised confidence begin to mend. Seeing Cassandra's smile return, Blake felt a sense of relief. He had not intended to crush her spirit, but to remind her of her own worth. He believed it was essential for those around him to maintain their own convictions rather than conforming blindly. This, he knew, was crucial for fostering honest and open communication in the future. I truly appreciate your gift, Blake said, carefully placing the seed into a plant bag. Cassandra's spirits lifted at this gesture, her efforts over time finally acknowledged. There was no greater joy for her. Let's continue with the gifts, Blake suggested. All right, Cassandra agreed, her mood visibly brighter. As Blake reached for another gift, he noticed Cassandra discreetly trying to hide one. His enhanced vision, a gift of his unique origins, allowed him to catch the subtle action. Ahem, let's share this one, Blake said with a mischievous grin, eyeing the gift Cassandra had attempted to conceal. Cassandra's face dropped, and she protested, Can't I just not want this one? Why? Blake asked, noticing the name on the gift box. Fleur Delacour. It was all too clear to him now. Please, stop associating with her. She's not a good person, Cassandra pleaded. Vilas can become monstrous when angered or upset, Blake chuckled. What a coincidence, I'm not exactly a saint myself. Besides, Fleur is only part Vila and doesn't turn into a monster. Cassandra realized her attempt to sway Blake was futile. Reluctantly, she presented the hidden gift box. We shouldn't speak ill of others. From now on, you two must get along like sisters. Her frustration boiling over, Cassandra bit Blake's shoulder in a fit of anger. Hey, be gentle. I'm not worried about the pain. Just don't damage your teeth, Blake joked, gently removing Cassandra from his shoulder. How about we forget about Fleur? I'm open to other suggestions. Cassandra, nursing her sore teeth, looked up at him with a mix of frustration and sadness. Can't we just not involve her? Don't be like that. You're all important to me, Blake said, his smile warm and reassuring. Cassandra felt a twinge of annoyance. She missed the way Blake used to act around her, straightforward and less evasive. The thought of Fleur, with her stunning beauty, made Cassandra uneasy. She feared that Blake's attention might shift entirely to Fleur, leaving her overlooked. Amidst her turmoil, Blake eagerly opened Fleur's gift. Inside, he found presents from both Fleur and her sister Gabrielle. Gabrielle's gift was a palm-sized doll, dressed similarly to how Gabrielle once was. The doll held a note in its hand, the message written in uneven English. "Let this Gabri accompany Brother Blake, so you won't feel lonely." The note's heartfelt message, despite its imperfect English, touched Blake deeply. Cassandra stared at the note in disbelief, her mind reeling from the implications. "You couldn't possibly be involved with both sisters," she stammered, her voice laced with shock. Blake shifted uncomfortably, a guilty expression crossing his face. "Ahem, actually, I never intended for things to turn out this way. Do you believe me?" he asked, though his tone suggested he knew how implausible his mock defense sounded. The truth was, Blake had always been cautious around Fleur, given her Vila heritage, but his encounter with Gabrielle, Fleur's sister, had been purely accidental. A bizarre mishap had led to Gabrielle being trapped in his master ball, an incident Blake still found hard to explain. "Do you really expect me to believe that?" Cassandra's voice trailed off, her distress evident. Dealing with one Vila was challenging enough, but the thought of two, especially sisters, as closely matched as Fleur and Gabrielle, was overwhelming. Trying to change the subject, Blake set aside Gabrielle's doll and picked up a gift from Fleur. It was a beautifully crafted wand handle, likely made by Fleur herself. He admired the craftsmanship before fitting it onto his own wand, the Rui wand. The black theme of the handle complemented the wand perfectly, though Cassandra couldn't help but comment, "It's very eye-catching. Makes me want to throw it away." As they continued to open gifts, Blake noted that most were food items, predominantly sweets and candies. It was no secret that he had a fondness for desserts, but he remained wary of the candies sent by some of the younger girls at school. Their boldness in hiding love potions within the sweets was something Blake found both amusing and concerning, knowing he'd have to inspect each piece carefully. After some time, Blake and Cassandra realized something, or rather, someone, was missing. "Aha! Granger didn't give you a gift!" Cassandra exclaimed, clapping her hands with glee. Blake's response was tinged with sadness. "Why are you so happy that Hermione didn't give me a gift?" he asked, puzzled by Cassandra's reaction. "You don't care about me," she retorted, before adding, "Maybe she's still angry with you." "Maybe," Blake mused, disappointed. "I'm disappointed in you. Now I won't play with you," Cassandra declared, her mood inexplicably brightening at the thought of Blake's misfortune. Their conversation was abruptly interrupted by the sound of a dimensional door opening. Hermione stepped through, her presence immediately causing Cassandra's smile to freeze. "Blake, happy birthday!" Hermione greeted him warmly, her voice soft and her eyes avoiding Cassandra's glare. She then produced a small gift box from her pocket, extending it towards Blake as a peace offering. Chapter 395, An Unexpected Gift and a Mysterious Assignment. "I noticed you seemed uncomfortable using a quill, so I thought this might be more to your liking." Hermione presented a small gift box containing an exquisite Mont Blanc pen, its craftsmanship evident in every detail. It was clear that Hermione had saved her pocket money for a considerable time to afford it, likely acquiring it through a group purchase. "Thank you for the gift, Hermione. I absolutely adore it." Blake caressed the pen with evident joy. "As long as you're happy with it," Hermione replied, a hint of relief in her voice. "My owl is unwell, so I had to deliver it in person. I didn't want to miss your birthday." Hermione fidgeted, touching the corners of her clothes nervously. "I should probably go now," she said, making a move to leave. "Wait, is there any chance you could stay a bit longer?" Blake asked, his eyes filled with hope. Hermione hesitated, casting a glance at Cassandra, whose expression was less than pleased. A moment of internal conflict was visible on her face before she sighed. "It seems I've come at an inopportune time. I'll leave." "No, you arrived just in time." Blake quickly took her hand, his grip gentle yet firm. Despite Hermione's attempts, she couldn't pull away. "Ah, the complexities of friendship," Hermione muttered under her breath, a reference to their unpredictable dynamics. Meanwhile, Agatha completed a mysterious transaction with a house elf at the front desk of Chaos Wish, a notorious organization known for its ruthless dealings. Handing over a blood-stained card, she was informed that her group, the Fourth Natural Disaster, had passed a test, earning them 50,000 gold galleons and a promise of increased rewards for future commissions. The house elf, unusually referring to itself as I rather than by name, indicated a level of authority and danger. Agatha noted the elf's careful documentation of organizations involved in the test, including those who had failed and been eliminated. Upon returning to their mountaintop base, Agatha reported the events to Old Rep, who in turn informed Blake. The message was simple: continue business as usual, accepting commissions and enjoying the remaining vacation time. Blake spent the last 2 weeks of his holiday in relative peace, mediating between Hermione and Cassandra, ensuring a semblance of harmony. As the new term approached, Blake prepared to return to King's Cross, ready for whatever challenges awaited, both in school and from the mysterious dealings of Chaos Wish. The best strategy, Blake mused, was to observe and let events unfold naturally, staying prepared to act when the time was right. Arriving at King's Cross Station early in the morning, Blake gazed at the familiar sight of the Hogwarts Express and found himself pondering the inconsistencies within the British Muggle Protection Act and the Office for the Prohibition of the Misuse of Muggle Artifacts. On one hand, the legislation was so stringent that even flying carpets were banned. Yet, on the other, broomsticks and trains, both originally Muggle inventions, were permitted to be enchanted for magical use. This apparent double standard puzzled him, especially considering that broomsticks were essential for Quidditch, thus seemingly exempt from such restrictions. And the Hogwarts Express itself was a prime example of this contradiction. Even Arthur Weasley, the author of the Muggle Protection Act, was known to secretly modify Muggle cars. The hypocrisy was glaring. As the station grew crowded, Blake's attention was drawn to a thin, middle-aged man with a pale face, carrying a shabby suitcase and moving through the crowd with his head down, as if trying to avoid drawing attention to himself. Blake realized that for such a man to board the Hogwarts Express, he must be affiliated with the school's staff, as professors typically did not travel by the train, with one notable exception. Curious, Blake followed the man and watched as Remus John Lupin, with his head still lowered, found an empty compartment and settled in. Lupin's actions betrayed his deep-seated sense of inferiority and his desire to remain unnoticed. Once inside the compartment, he sighed in relief, placed his suitcase on the table, and slumped into the chair, still feeling weak from his recent werewolf transformation. Lupin was overwhelmed by the thought that Dumbledore had invited him, a werewolf often shunned by society, to become a professor at Hogwarts. Given his struggles with discrimination and the difficulty of finding employment, he couldn't refuse such an opportunity, despite the risk of his true identity being discovered. The revelation of his condition could not only end his tenure, but also tarnish Dumbledore's reputation. Yet, Lupin took solace in the fact that aside from his transformations, he appeared no different from anyone else. However, the presence of Severus Snape as the potions professor at Hogwarts complicated matters. Their history was fraught with mutual animosity, and Lupin couldn't help but worry that Snape might sabotage the Wolfsbane potion he needed to manage his condition. "I just have to be careful. Never let anyone know my identity," Lupin muttered to himself, reflecting on Dumbledore's assurance that Snape would be asked to brew the potion for him. As he watched the students outside and reminisced about the past, Lupin, still weakened from his transformation, felt drowsy and decided to rest. He retrieved a worn but clean coat from his suitcase to use as a blanket. Just then, there was a knock on the carriage door. Surprised, Lupin saw a young man with light blonde hair, dressed in the Hufflepuff school uniform, standing at the door and looking in quietly. "Oh, of course you're welcome to join me. I mean, no one else is sitting here," Lupin responded, inviting the boy in without hesitation. Blake, feeling it would be too presumptuous to take a carriage all to himself, decided to join a Hufflepuff student. He had always held a favorable view of Hufflepuff students. "Thank you so much," Blake expressed his gratitude and took a seat directly opposite Lupin. Pretending to gaze out the window, Blake couldn't help but steal glances at Lupin. He had never encountered a werewolf firsthand and was curious. In the wizarding world, werewolves were often stigmatized, much like how AIDS patients were viewed in the Muggle world. However, Blake understood that werewolves, when in human form, were not as dangerous as many believed. Their condition was only highly contagious during their transformation through their saliva and blood. Lupin, unaware of Blake's surreptitious observation, felt his fatigue creeping in. "If you don't mind, I'd like to take a nap," Lupin requested politely. "Oh, of course, I don't mind," Blake replied with a smile, appreciating Lupin's manners. Just as Blake was about to settle into his own thoughts, he couldn't help but comment on Lupin's appearance. "You don't look well, Professor Lupin." Gathering his energy, Lupin responded, "Yes, I've been ill recently, which has left me quite weak." "Have you recovered? You still seem quite tired," Blake inquired, his curiosity getting the better of him. Lupin, trying to keep the conversation short to rest, explained, "It's a recent ailment. I'm still recovering and would like to rest a bit." Blake, however, was not ready to drop the subject. Recovery from a serious illness does leave one weakened. Didn't St. Mungo's provide you with any nutritional supplements? Lupin managed a bitter smile. As a werewolf living in secrecy, visiting St. Mungo's was not an option, and he certainly couldn't afford the luxury of nutritional supplements. "The healer must have overlooked it," Lupin suggested, trying to deflect. "It's okay. I have some here," Blake said, pulling out 2 bottles of glowing green nutritional supplements from his pocket, items he had borrowed from Snape's personal stock, much to the potion master's chagrin. Lupin was taken aback by the high-quality potions before him. The cost of such supplements was beyond his means, and he hesitated to accept such a generous offer from a student. "No, I can't accept this. It's too precious," Lupin protested, pushing the bottles back. Blake, undeterred, insisted, "Is it very precious? I have plenty more," and began to pull out several more bottles. Lupin, realizing Blake's intent to give even more, quickly intervened. "Child, these potions are very valuable. You should save them, not waste them on me." Blake, with a determined look, responded, "Magic potions are meant to be used, especially to help those in need. Please, take them." The exchange highlighted not only the generosity of the young wizard, but also the complex dynamics of the wizarding world's views on werewolves and the kindness that can transcend such prejudices. "Valuable only when utilized by those in need," Blake asserted with conviction. "I believe these potions should be preserved and shelved, not squandered. To use them otherwise is the greatest waste." Snape interjected, "Why don't you hand over your ID card?" Upon hearing Blake's argument, Lupin found himself unexpectedly agreeing. It seemed there was logic in the young student's words. Lost in thought, he was startled when Blake placed a potion bottle into his hand. "Now, you're someone who has just recovered from a severe illness, and this potion is precisely what you need," Blake explained, pressing the bottle into Lupin's palm. "You should drink it. Otherwise, how will you find the strength to teach us defense against the dark arts once the term begins?" "Professor Remus John Lupin?" Lupin stared at Blake, taken aback. "How do you know my full name, or that I am a professor?" Blake gestured towards Lupin's suitcase. "Your name is on it, Professor. Besides, with the new school year approaching, it's common knowledge that we'll be welcoming a new Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher. It wasn't too difficult to deduce." Lupin caressed the potion bottle, a glimmer of respect in his eyes. "You're quite the astute young man. What's your name?" "I'm a Hufflepuff student about to enter my 3rd year. You can call me Blake," he replied. Upon hearing the name Blake, Lupin's grip on the bottle tightened. Memories of another Blake flashed through his mind, a traitor whose motives he could never fathom. "Child, what is your last name?" Lupin inquired gently. "My actual surname is Dumbledore, Professor." Blake revealed. "What? Dumbledore? As in Professor Dumbledore's Dumbledore?" "Yes, Professor Dumbledore is actually my father," Blake confirmed. Lupin was struck speechless, a whirlwind of emotions evident on his face. "Ding! An unusually shocking emotion has been detected," announced an unseen voice. "Ding! Congratulations to the host for obtaining the golden treasure chest." This unexpected revelation not only stunned Lupin, but also hinted at the depth of the story yet to unfold. Blake, with his connection to Dumbledore and his insightful understanding of the importance of potions, had just begun to weave his own tale within the hallowed halls of Hogwarts. Chapter 396. Lupin, 2 little girlfriends? Or from a hostile house? Hiss! So scary. That joke doesn't sound very convincing, kid, Lupin said with a hint of helplessness. Professor Dumbledore is quite advanced in age. How could he possibly have such a young child? And even if it were true, surely the child would be in Gryffindor, not Hufflepuff. Yet it seems you're quite content there. Hey, I know it's hard to believe, the young wizard replied. I was skeptical at first, too. My father prefers to keep a low profile about this. That's why I'm enrolled at Hogwarts under the surname Green. You can call me Blake Green. I believe Professor Dumbledore chose you to be a professor despite knowing about your condition as a werewolf, because you're one of us. That's why I feel compelled to share a few things with you. Lupin's eyes widened in shock. How did you know? His greatest secret, his identity as a werewolf, was something he had hoped to conceal. Yet, here he was, exposed before he even stepped foot into Hogwarts. You have bloodshot eyes, which is normal, but your eyes are particularly bloodshot. Additionally, your face is pale, and your teeth are slightly elongated. You appear very clean, yet there's a faint, fishy odor about you. It's the residual scent of blood from your skin tearing during your transformations. I can deduce that you're either a vampire or a werewolf. Given my familiarity with vampires, it's clear to me that you're not one. Moreover, when you speak, you tend to avoid eye contact, a sign of a deep-seated inferiority complex. Thus, I boldly conclude that you're a werewolf who has faced significant discrimination, Blake explained. Lupin offered a bitter smile. You're correct. I am a werewolf. He feared his career at Hogwarts was over before it began. Revealing his identity could not only end his tenure, but also subject Dumbledore to public criticism for hiring him. Blake quickly interjected, Why wouldn't you be able to stay? Dumbledore trusts you. I promise not to reveal your secret. You should accept the teaching position with confidence. The defense against the dark arts professors in recent years haven't been up to par. We're in desperate need of someone with real expertise. Besides, if Professor Dumbledore found out I was the reason you left, I'd be in for a serious reprimand. You have no idea how much he dislikes causing harm. Lupin looked at Blake, astonished. You don't mind that I'm a werewolf? Throughout the years, he had encountered many who initially treated him kindly, only to turn cold or even hostile upon discovering his condition. Yet, here was Blake, not only unafraid but actively encouraging him to stay. Of course, I don't mind. However, we must keep your identity a secret to avoid unnecessary concern, Blake assured him. Despite the promise, Lupin couldn't help but feel a mix of worry and relief. He desperately needed this job. Don't worry, Professor Lupin. Dumbledore and I are on the same side. We're all part of the same team. I wouldn't betray you, Blake said, offering further reassurance. Lupin sighed. Thank you. I really need this job. You're welcome. We're all in this together. Now, since we're on the same team, you should drink this nutritional supplement, Blake said, handing over a bottle of potion. Lupin, though slightly bewildered by Blake's unconventional approach, couldn't help but accept the potion. After all, it's difficult to refuse such earnest hospitality. He took a sip of the nutritional potion, feeling a bit more at ease with his new ally by his side. Lupin felt a surge of vitality coursing through his veins after just a sip of the potion. The overwhelming drowsiness that had plagued him vanished instantly, leaving him with a newfound strength. He looked at Blake with gratitude. Thank you for the potion, Blake. It's truly precious. Lupin expressed his appreciation, acknowledging the value of the gift. Oh, it's nothing. I got it from Severus anyway, Blake replied nonchalantly. Lupin winced slightly, a twinge of discomfort at the mention of Snape's name. The idea that Snape had concocted these potions and that Blake had appropriated them was surprising enough, but Blake's casual reference to a professor by his first name seemed rather improper for a student. As Lupin was mulling over these thoughts, the sound of voices interrupted him. Blake, so you are here, called out a voice from outside the carriage door. Turning his gaze, Lupin saw two girls peering in. Oh, you're here? Come in quickly. Blake beckoned Hermione and Cassandra into the carriage, promptly assisting them with their luggage. Once he had settled their belongings, Blake ushered them to the seat he had been occupying, then unhesitatingly wedged himself between the two girls. Lupin observed Blake's overly familiar gesture with a slight twitch of his eye. Despite this, the carriage seats were generously sized, comfortably accommodating the trio side by side. These are my good friends, Hermione Granger and Cassandra Worley, Blake introduced them. Hermione, Cassandra, this is our new Defense Against the Dark Arts professor for the semester, Professor Remus John Lupin. He's not like Quirrell or Lockhart. He's genuinely competent. Upon realizing they were in the presence of a professor, Hermione and Cassandra suddenly became uneasy. They shared a look that silently agreed Blake's casual behavior was somewhat inappropriate in front of a faculty member. Despite their initial impulse to distance themselves from Blake's boldness, the girls found themselves accepting the situation, albeit reluctantly, given Blake's undeniable charm and influence. Lupin watched with a mix of surprise and amusement as the two young witches from Gryffindor and Slytherin, respectively, interacted. It was intriguing to see Blake not only had close friendships with students from rival houses, but that these friendships appeared harmonious. The realization that these relationships transcended house rivalries was both astonishing and heartening. Chapter 397. Is the Magic Zoo fun? Half of it is mine. Professor Lupin was indeed a capable wizard, far surpassing the likes of the fisherman Quirrell and the charlatan Lockhart. His suitability as the Defense Against the Dark Arts professor was not only apparent, but also deeply felt during the engaging discussion on the subject with Blake. Cassandra and Hermione, too, found themselves relieved and pleased with this discovery. After all, who wouldn't appreciate a competent and reliable professor, especially after their Defense Against the Dark Arts education had been so disrupted for 2 years? As Blake and his friends were coming to appreciate Professor Lupin's capabilities, Lupin himself was experiencing his own form of astonishment. The depth of knowledge and practical experience Blake displayed in their conversation about Defense Against the Dark Arts belied his young age. Had Lupin not been aware of Blake's youth, he might have mistaken him for a seasoned wizard, not a boy about to enter his 3rd year. This realization was both shocking and intriguing to Lupin, making their conversation increasingly enjoyable, especially as he felt more invigorated with each sip of his nutritional supplement. Gradually, Cassandra and Hermione overcame their initial shyness and joined the lively discussion, revealing themselves to be exceptionally bright students. Lupin couldn't help but think this might be the beginning of something promising. Their animated chat was interrupted by a knock on the carriage door. Lupin glanced up to see a very familiar face peering in. Blake, do you still have room here? We arrived late today, and there are no empty carriages left, Harry said, looking somewhat uneasy at the sight of the unfamiliar middle-aged man in the carriage. However, his gaze quickly shifted back to Blake, the person he knew best among those present. Of course, there's room, Lupin interjected before Blake could respond. He had immediately recognized Harry, having been well acquainted with his parents. Harry's resemblance to James, combined with Lily's striking green eyes, made him easily identifiable. Come in, we have 2 seats available here, Lupin said, moving aside to make room next to him by the window. Oh, thank you, sir, Harry replied, entering the carriage with his friend Ronald, both of them showing a hint of restraint. It was unusual for them to share a carriage with strangers, but the lack of alternatives left them with little choice. The carriage fell into an awkward silence until Blake decided to steer the conversation towards a lighter topic. By the way, do you think the magical zoo is fun? He asked. Ronald's eyes immediately sparkled with excitement. Of course, it's fun! Merlin's beard. It's crowded with people. If it weren't for the tickets Blake gave our family, we might not have been able to get in until school started. He continued enthusiastically. You wouldn't believe it, but ever since Ginny came back from there, she hasn't stopped talking about going again. Riding the fire dragon there made her lose all interest in flying on Fred's broom. Ronald's chatter about family and fun times was infectious, and Blake chimed in, as long as it's enjoyable, I'll definitely visit again during the holidays. I hear they're planning some special activities for Christmas. Harry, intrigued, couldn't help but ask, Blake, how did you manage to get so many tickets? And not just any tickets, but VIP ones that let you access all the events for free. VIP tickets were highly coveted, offering privileges like direct access through a VIP entrance, avoiding the long queues, and exclusive boat transfers, ensuring a comfortable and hassle-free experience. You also have priority access without needing to queue, Blake said calmly. Oh, that's because I own 50% of this zoo, so getting some VIP tickets is quite simple for me. Most of the magical creatures in the zoo were either owned or tamed by him. If it weren't for this, he would still be attending school regularly. Newt would have had to catch him and appoint him as the director. Upon hearing this, Ronald was so astounded that he was speechless. It was akin to discussing the fun of Disneyland with your classmates, only for one of them to reveal that they own half of that magical place. Under normal circumstances, Ronald would be skeptical of such a claim. But coming from Blake, it seemed entirely plausible. Then, it makes sense. It all makes sense now, Harry and Ronald managed to say, their minds racing with the implications. What seemed impossible for others was suddenly within the realm of possibility with Blake. At that moment, Blake was listening to the system's report with satisfaction. A few more treasure chests have arrived. I'm so happy, he thought to himself. Are you involved with that magical zoo that was recently established? Lupin asked, visibly surprised. Yes, Blake nodded. Dumbledore selected the location. We'll be spending most of this summer vacation there. Cassandra and Hermione have been a great help too. Hermione and Cassandra nodded in confirmation, which made Lupin reluctantly accept this astonishing revelation. But if Dumbledore was indeed involved in choosing the location, did that mean the earlier statement about Blake's last name being Dumbledore was also true? No, that couldn't be. Dumbledore was of considerable age. Could it be that he had somehow become more vigorous with age? And indeed, there was a striking resemblance in their eyes. The thought was unsettling to Lupin, challenging his worldview significantly. He resolved not to let his curiosity get the better of him upon returning to school, fearing the repercussions of prying too much. However, Dumbledore wasn't known to be petty. Perhaps a few discreet questions wouldn't hurt. Later, as they enjoyed snacks from the trolley, the conversation turned to Harry's life with his relatives. Blake was appalled to learn about the Dursleys' treatment of Harry, especially the incident with Aunt Marge. Lupin, on the other hand, applauded Harry's escape, albeit led him to a dangerous encounter in Knockturn Alley and a frightening sighting of a large black dog. You mentioned seeing a large black dog? Lupin interrupted, his tone suddenly serious. Yes, it was quite strange. The dog looked menacing and kept staring at me. But after I hit it with a disarming spell, it ran away, Harry recounted, unaware of the concern growing on Lupin's face. The mention of the large black dog immediately alerted Lupin to the possibility that it was Sirius Black in his animagus form. Among the original Marauders, only he and Sirius knew this secret, with James Potter and Peter Pettigrew gone. Lupin was tormented by the thought of Sirius's betrayal and his actions against the Potters. And now, Sirius seemed to be lurking near Harry, raising fears about his intentions. "Professor, what's wrong?" Harry asked, noticing Lupin's troubled expression. "Oh, it's nothing," Lupin quickly masked his concern, not wanting to alarm Harry further. Lupin's face lit up with joy as he spoke to Harry. Given his knowledge of Sirius Black, Lupin knew it was highly unlikely that Harry could have fended off Sirius with a mere disarming spell. The most plausible explanation was that Sirius had other plans in motion, or something had startled him enough to let Harry escape for the moment. After all, if Sirius had truly intended to harm Harry, it would have been a simple task for him. This realization filled Lupin with relief. Harry was safe, for now. Meanwhile, Blake was quietly enjoying a slice of pie, but his attention was fully on the conversation unfolding between Lupin and Harry. Curiosity piqued, he interjected, "Professor Lupin, I've heard that you were close friends with Harry's father during your time at Hogwarts?" Caught off guard by Blake's knowledge, Lupin hesitated before admitting, "Yes, that's true. Harry, you bear a striking resemblance to James, though your eyes are your mother's." This sentiment, familiar to Harry, was something many who knew his parents had shared with him. Harry, surprised, pressed on. "Were you really best friends with my father?" Lupin corrected. "Yes, best friends, to be precise." He then explained his initial reluctance to discuss his relationship with Harry's parents, attributing it to a mix of excitement and worry upon seeing Harry, which brought back a flood of memories with James and their friends. Harry, intrigued, asked, "What worries you, Professor?" Lupin's concern was evident as he replied, "Your safety, Harry, given the threat Sirius poses." Harry's expression darkened at the mention of Sirius. Mr. Weasley has told me about him. He was a friend of my father's, wasn't he? Lupin sighed, the weight of the past heavy on his shoulders. Yes, Sirius. Your dad, Peter Pettigrew, and I were all best friends. We've been through so much together. But Sirius, his betrayal was unfathomable. He killed 3 of our friends. Harry's anger towards Sirius was palpable, though Lupin tried to reassure him. We'll capture him, Harry. I won't let him hurt you. I'm not scared, Harry declared. Let him come. I'll face him. Lupin urged caution. He's dangerous, Harry. You mustn't seek him out. Lupin's concern was not unfounded. A young Gryffindor like Harry might indeed act recklessly. Blake, listening in, realized Lupin must have connected the dots about the big black dog being Sirius. Yet, he wondered why Lupin hadn't informed Dumbledore about their ability to become animagi, which could have cleared Sirius's name by suggesting Pettigrew's escape in his animagus form. As these thoughts swirled, Blake noticed Ron enjoying a mint wand candy, oblivious to the gravity of the situation. A sudden realization struck Blake. Could Peter Pettigrew be hiding closer than they thought, perhaps even within Ron's own possessions? This thought lingered as Blake observed a slight bulge in one of Ron's pockets, hinting at secrets yet to be uncovered. Blake's mind raced with a daring idea. What if he could reveal Peter Pettigrew's true identity to Remus Lupin? After all, Pettigrew, now disguised as Scabbers the Mouse, had been hiding right under everyone's noses. If Sirius Black could recognize Pettigrew from a mere photograph in the newspaper, surely Lupin, once a close friend, would recognize him in person. The thought made the corners of Blake's mouth curl up in anticipation. This revelation could change everything. Pettigrew's unmasking would not only prove Sirius's innocence, but also bring justice for the crimes Pettigrew had committed. Blake knew the risks involved in exposing Pettigrew. It would require careful planning and precise execution, yet the potential rewards outweighed the dangers. This was a chance to right a grave wrong, to alter the course of their lives dramatically. As Blake pondered his next steps, he couldn't help but feel a surge of excitement. The wheels were set in motion for a confrontation that could shake the very foundations of their world. Chapter 398, Blake's Cunning Plan. Blake pondered over Peter Pettigrew's situation, his mind quickly formulating a plan. Setting aside the pie he had been enjoying, he reached for a pack of spicy chips, a current favorite among Hogwarts' young wizards, and offered them to Ronald and Harry. As they munched on the snacks, Blake casually mentioned, "By the way, Ronald, Ginny told me your pet rat hasn't been feeling well lately." Ronald's initial delight faded upon hearing this. "Yeah, I suppose it's just old age. It's been quite lethargic lately," he replied, his voice tinged with concern. Blake couldn't help but smirk inwardly. Peter Pettigrew, more than anyone, knew the depth of Sirius Black's grievances. With Sirius now having escaped from Azkaban, it was no wonder Pettigrew, ever the coward, was terrified. "I've done some research on magical creatures. If you're willing, I could take a look at your rat," what Blake offered, his tone casual yet confident. Ronald's eyes sparkled with hope. "Really? That would be amazing. I mean, you do own half the magical creature zoo, so you must know your stuff. Even though my rat, Madara, isn't exactly a magical creature, there must be some similarities, right?" Eagerly, Ronald attempted to retrieve his pet from his pocket, only to find the rat, previously so weak, now clinging desperately to the fabric, refusing to be coaxed out. "Come on, Madara. Blake's here to help you," Ronald coaxed, puzzled by the rat's sudden vigor. Blake watched with amusement as the rat, its body shaking, finally emerged. The sight of the creature, its fur patchy and skin showing, was pitiful. Blake noted how one of its front paws was tightly clenched, a clear attempt to conceal its missing digit, a detail Peter Pettigrew feared might give him away to Remus Lupin. Despite the rat's desperate state, Blake maintained his distance, his distaste for such pets evident. Cassandra and Hermione also stepped back, giving the scene a wide berth. "He looks quite unwell," Lupin observed, his tone neutral. Blake shot Lupin a surprised look. Could it be that Lupin hadn't recognized Pettigrew? Ronald, meanwhile, lamented the rat's hair loss, unaware of the self-inflicted nature of its baldness. Blake, however, noticed the blood on its skin, a testament to Pettigrew's desperation to remain undetected. Despite the transformation, Pettigrew's efforts seemed to have paid off, as Lupin showed no sign of recognition. Animagi, after all, were indistinguishable from real animals once transformed. Blake, seizing the opportunity to further unnerve Pettigrew, commented, "It's odd how it keeps touching its paw." The rat ceased its struggles, its despair palpable. Ronald explained, "It's been missing a finger since it came to our house. It used to be my brother Percy's pet, but now it's mine." Pettigrew, listening in, was a bundle of nerves, terrified that Lupin might recognize him. Yet, to his relief, Lupin remained oblivious to his true identity. Blake's clever manipulation of the situation had not only exposed Pettigrew's fear, but also subtly tested Lupin's reaction, all without arousing suspicion. The game of cat and mouse, it seemed, was far from over. Recognizing him was not straightforward. Blake glanced at Lupin, whose face was devoid of any expression, a clear indication of his internal conflict. Lupin had always believed that Peter Pettigrew had perished, leaving behind nothing but a finger, a tragic end for what he thought was Sirius Black's innocent victim. In Lupin's mind, Pettigrew was the unfortunate friend betrayed by Sirius, not a traitor. The image of Pettigrew as a whole mouse was deeply ingrained in Lupin's memory, making it difficult for him to reconcile with the damaged creature before him. Sirius, on the other hand, recognized Pettigrew immediately. He knew the truth, that he had been wrongfully accused, and that Pettigrew was the real traitor to the Potters. The missing finger was the giveaway. Sirius had believed Pettigrew to be dead, a belief that contributed to his despair and subsequent imprisonment in Azkaban. It wasn't until he saw a photograph in the newspaper featuring a mouse with a missing claw that he realized Pettigrew was alive. This revelation reignited Sirius's determination, much like Grindelwald's escape from prison, driven by a newfound purpose to confront the betrayer. As Blake pieced together these thoughts, his interest in the situation began to fade. Ronald, noticing Blake's prolonged silence, couldn't help but express his concern for Banban, his pet rat who was, in reality, Pettigrew in disguise. Ronald was prepared for the worst, yet he hoped for a solution that would allow his pet to continue living. "It's not a physical ailment," Blake finally said, breaking the silence. "It seems to be psychological. He's been exhibiting signs of anxiety and fear." Pettigrew, still suspended in midair, was taken aback by Blake's accurate diagnosis. Ronald, puzzled yet trusting, asked for a solution. If he were human, words might ease his worries. "But he's a mouse, and my words won't reach him," Blake explained, despite knowing well that he could communicate with animals. This statement left Cassandra and Hermione puzzled, as they were aware of Blake's unique ability. Yet they remained silent, sensing Blake had a plan. Ronald, growing anxious, wondered if medication could help. Blake reassured him, "Don't worry. As the master of magical beasts, I have a solution." Ronald's anxiety eased at Blake's confidence. Meanwhile, Pettigrew, sensing Lupin's failure to recognize him, felt a momentary relief from his fear and despair. Blake, observing Pettigrew's behavior, was not fooled by the occasional flicker of cunning in the rat's eyes. He knew Pettigrew for the shameless traitor he was, and was not inclined to let him off easily. "I have a method that might make your pet more docile and extend its life," Blake revealed, piquing Ronald's interest. Ronald remembered a time when Banban was more docile and hoped for a return to those days, especially given the rat's recent irritability. Pettigrew, now curious, wondered what Blake had in mind to tame him. Blake, with a meaningful smile, hinted at a solution that would address Pettigrew's behavior, leaving everyone in suspense about his next move. Peter Pettigrew, in his rat form as Scabbers, was in a state of panic. The conversation had taken a turn he hadn't expected. You, this rat, haven't been sterilized yet, have you?" Blake mused, causing Peter to freeze in shock. The concept of sterilization was foreign to Ronald, who asked innocently, "Sterilization? What is it?" Blake explained, "Oh, you don't know? Sterilization can help your pets avoid many diseases, live longer, and become more docile. Essentially, it involves castration." Upon hearing this, Peter, still in his rat form, began to struggle frantically in the air, his mind racing with fear. Blake, with a gentle nod, seemed to cast a spell that calmed Peter instantly, rendering him immobile yet fully conscious, able to sense his surroundings and hear the ongoing conversation. To Ronald, it appeared as though Blake had merely soothed Scabbers with a touch, reinforcing his belief in Blake's expertise with magical creatures. However, Ronald was visibly uncomfortable with the idea, prompting Blake to clarify. "You're joking, right?" Understanding dawned on Ronald, and Peter felt a glimmer of hope at his hesitation. Hermione chimed in, supporting Blake's claim with her knowledge from reading numerous cat books, further convincing Ronald. Harry, too, shared his experiences with Mrs. Fig's cats, including a visit to the vet, which seemed to sway Ronald further. Despite his reluctance, Ronald was persuaded by Blake's argument that the procedure would ensure Scabbers' health and longevity. With a heavy heart, Ronald consented, though he couldn't bring himself to voice the full extent of his reasoning. Peter's heart sank as Ronald agreed to the procedure. "No," he thought despairingly, unable to voice his plea. "When will we do it?" Ronald asked, eager to ensure Scabbers' well-being as soon as possible. Blake suggested they proceed immediately, fearing the rat might escape if they waited. Demonstrating his preparedness, Blake magically transformed 2 empty snack bags into medical gloves and produced a scalpel, assuring Ronald of his expertise and promising a painless procedure for Scabbers. Ronald, left with no other choice, placed his trust in Blake. "Don't worry, Banban won't feel any pain. It'll be over before you know it," Blake reassured him, though his assurance applied only to the rat's physical sensation, not to Peter's mental anguish. Lupin observed from the sidelines, witnessing Blake's enthusiastic and somewhat unconventional approach to caring for magical creatures, pondering the unique character of this young wizard. With a compassionate heart, Lupin suggested, "Let's step outside for a bit." Cassandra and Hermione, having no interest in witnessing the procedure dubbed a minor surgery, followed Lupin out. Harry and Ron, however, chose to stay. After ensuring the car door was securely shut, Blake cleared the table of any snack remnants. He then skillfully used a transfiguration spell to transform a piece of cake wrapper into a pristine white cloth, which he carefully spread across the table. With precision, he gently placed the limp form of Scabbers, now revealed to be Peter Pettigrew in his animagus form, onto the cloth, preparing for the procedure. In front of a concerned Ron and a curious Harry, Blake performed a spell that resembled a stunning spell, rendering Scabbers unconscious. Ron, touched by the gesture, whispered reassuringly, "Scabbers, just sleep well, and you'll be all right." However, the reality was far from what Ron believed. Inside, Peter Pettigrew was fully conscious and panicked. This wasn't a stunning spell, and there was no anesthesia. In his mind, he screamed, "You devil, how could you?" Blake then addressed the boys. "I'm about to begin. The next part might be a bit unsettling. Are you sure you don't want to step back?" Harry, showing solidarity with his friends, shook his head, indicating his decision to stay. Resigned to his fate, Pettigrew felt a wave of despair wash over him. As Blake initiated the procedure, Pettigrew could only let out a silent scream of agony. A single tear escaped from the corner of his eye, a silent testament to the pain he endured. Chapter 399, Peter's Transformation. Blake's expertise with the knife was astonishing. Ronald and Harry watched in awe as he performed with smooth, precise movements, a testament to his skills as a magizoologist. Indeed, he was so adept that he could even perform surgery on a mouse without a hitch. The operation was a success, Blake announced, his voice brimming with satisfaction as he tidied up the aftermath of the procedure. Banban, now awakening from anesthesia, opened his eyes filled with confusion and fear, as he gazed upon the figure before him. "Congratulations, Banban. You're going to be much more docile from now on," Blake cheerfully informed the bewildered creature, who could only respond with a faint squeak before fainting. What's happening?" Ronald asked, a hint of concern in his voice. "Don't worry, he's just coming around from the anesthesia." Blake reassured him as he expertly stopped the bleeding and applied a series of magical treatments that were beyond Ronald and Harry's comprehension. "I assure you, Banban will be exceptionally gentle from this point forward," Blake confidently stated, handing the now-healed Scabbers back to Ronald. Despite the successful treatment, Scabbers seemed different, missing his usual spark. As Ronald prepared to return Scabbers to his pocket, Blake presented him with a vial filled with small pills. "Give him one of these daily. Think of it as a treat," Blake explained. "This is a special antidepressant I've developed for animals. Many of the creatures in the zoo were rescued from smugglers, some having been caged for years, leading to severe depression. This medication helps them recover. Ronald, holding the vial, was taken aback. Was there really a medication that could replace surgical intervention? Yet, he didn't voice his thoughts, still processing the recent events. Now, give him one, even though he's still unconscious. The pill will dissolve in his mouth. After all, how else would we get these magical creatures to take their medicine? Blake elaborated. That makes sense, Ronald muttered, carefully placing a pill into Banban's mouth. True to Blake's word, the pill liquefied and was instinctively swallowed by the unconscious creature. As Harry stepped outside, others began to enter the room. Is it done? They inquired. Yes, he's just sleeping. Oh, he's waking up! Ronald exclaimed, surprised. Peter Pettigrew's eyes fluttered open, his mind swirling with confusion. Who am I? Where am I? What am I doing? But the disorientation lasted only a moment before the full weight of his situation crashed down on him, along with the realization of what had just occurred. Feeling a void where there once was none, Peter's body tensed, and he attempted to leap from Ronald's grasp, only to find his movements lacked their former strength. To Ronald, however, Scabbers seemed significantly calmer than before, a stark contrast to his previous aggressive behavior. Scabbers has really become a lot more docile. Blake, you're truly amazing, Ronald exclaimed, impressed by the transformation. It's nothing, Blake replied modestly, though internally he was pleased. If Peter Pettigrew still harbored any thoughts of escape, then Blake's intervention had indeed worked. Peter, feeling the soreness in his body, was seething with anger, yet also gripped by fear as he realized his animagus transformation was no longer functioning. How can this be? Why can't I change back? He panicked internally, wondering if Blake had uncovered his secret. Calm down, Peter. There must be some explanation, he told himself, trying to quell his rising panic. Ronald, oblivious to the turmoil within Banban, gently placed him back into his pocket, ready to move on from the day's unexpected events. Blake's appetite had significantly improved after his pet's illness was cured, leading him to indulge in eating and drinking once more. However, his table manners, or lack thereof, caught Ronald's attention, who couldn't help but feel a mix of amusement and disgust. Ronald had just been handily eating a mouse, and now he was devouring a piece of pie with the same hands. Blake internally grimaced at the thought, finding it unhygienic. To his surprise, Blake noticed Hermione and Cassandra giving him looks of disdain. Confused, he asked, "What's wrong with you two? Have you washed your hands?" Hermione inquired, her tone laced with concern. "I'm wearing gloves." Blake responded, trying to defend himself. You sit in," Cassandra insisted, pushing Blake towards the window seat, effectively distancing him. Blake felt a pang of disappointment as he realized he wouldn't be able to sit between the two girls as he had hoped. He watched, slightly annoyed, as Cassandra strategically positioned Hermione next to her and took the outer seat herself, clearly indicating her discomfort with Blake's hygiene. Despite his frustration, Blake couldn't help but move closer to Hermione again, who, although slightly taken aback, didn't move away. Seizing the opportunity, Blake decided to change the subject. "Hermione, do you like cats?" he asked, trying to distract from the earlier discomfort. Hermione nodded, her interest piqued. Blake smiled and reached into his pocket, pulling out a ginger cat that looked rather peculiar. Its face appeared as if it had been squashed flat. "This cat has the blood of a cat. I bought it in Diagon Alley last time, and now I give it to you," Blake announced, presenting the oddly shaped cat to Hermione. Ronald instinctively covered his pocket, worried about the mouse he had inside, while Harry looked on in amazement at the cat's unique appearance. Despite its unconventional looks, Hermione instantly fell in love with the cat. "Thank you, Blake. Does it have a name?" Hermione asked, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "No, you can name it," Blake replied. "Then just call it Crookshanks," Hermione decided, delighted with her new pet. Blake smiled, pleased with her choice. "Okay, that's a good name." With that, Crookshanks officially became Hermione's beloved pet, and Blake found himself welcomed back to her side, his earlier faux pas seemingly forgiven in light of the thoughtful gift. Cassandra, noticing the exchange, hoped for a gift of her own. However, Blake, still feeling slighted by her earlier push, pretended not to notice her hints. Cassandra, realizing she wouldn't be receiving a gift due to her earlier behavior, reluctantly let go of her attempt to coax Blake into generosity. As the evening progressed, Blake noticed the temperature dropping rapidly, and the train came to an unexpected stop. A strange white mist enveloped the outside, and the atmosphere inside the carriage grew tense. Blake, sensing something amiss, prepared himself, his wand at the ready. Suddenly, a chilling gust of wind entered through the slightly ajar carriage door, followed by the appearance of a hand so thin and grotesque it resembled a mummy's, closing in on the carriage door. The sudden cold and the eerie presence signaled the arrival of a creature known for causing such disturbances. Chapter 400. Blake, did I let you run away? Die for me. The sliding door of the carriage creaked open, revealing a figure shrouded in a tattered cloak, its appearance akin to that of a creature soaked in water, floating ominously into the space. The moment it entered, a palpable shift occurred within the carriage. The once joyful and vibrant emotions of its occupants were mercilessly drained away, leaving behind a void filled with endless despair and negativity. This was the work of a Dementor. A sharp scream pierced the air as Harry collapsed backward, evidently in more agony than anyone else present. The Dementor's absorption of his positive emotions left him drowning in a sea of pain and despair, a reaction that seemed to pique the creature's interest. Given that Dementors lack eyes and discern individuals based on their emotional scent, it mistakenly identified Harry, who exhibited the most intense reaction, as Sirius Black, the fugitive it was tasked to capture. In an instant, Blake, who had been seated by the window, apparated in front of the Dementor. The joy within him began to evaporate swiftly, replaced by a rising tide of violent emotion. Silently, he stowed away the Patronus charm he was about to cast, opting for a different spell instead. The Dementor, thrilled by the rich happiness it was devouring from Blake, turned its attention away from Harry, unaware of the impending doom. As it feasted on Blake's happiness, a sudden, inexplicable terror seized it. This was an emotion foreign to Dementors, typically experienced only by those who encountered them, yet now it emanated from within. The creature was momentarily stunned before realizing the source of its fear. The food before it, once a source of nourishment, had left behind remnants so horrifying that even without eyes, the Dementor could see the terrifying red light flashing in Blake's gaze. "Do you enjoy it?" Blake inquired, his voice eerily calm. The Dementor, taken aback, had never encountered a victim who could speak so composedly after being drained. "So you're harming me, which means I can retaliate, correct?" With that, Blake raised his wand, and a torrent of blazing flames engulfed the Dementor. It let out a shrill scream before being reduced to smoke by the fire. Blake's eyes sparkled with excitement as he observed the remains of the Dementor. Dementors, being corporeal entities of darkness, were vulnerable to Gubrathian fire, a revelation that ignited a fierce desire within Blake to annihilate them. Under the astonished gazes of the other passengers, Blake cast an explosive spell, tearing a hole through the carriage roof, and then apparated onto it. His actions might have seemed excessive, but after having his happiness drained, Blake felt an overwhelming urge to destroy. From his vantage point, Blake's true eyes surveyed the scene. More than 10 Dementors were preying upon the passengers inside the carriage, while over 20 more floated ominously in the sky, silently observing. They had been dispatched by the Ministry of Magic, forcing the Hogwarts Express to halt under the guise of searching for wanted criminals. Seizing this opportunity, Blake prepared to confront the dark creatures head-on, his heart set on their destruction. In their quest to absorb the happiness of the students, the Dementors had inadvertently given Blake a justifiable reason to eliminate them. The notion of feasting on joy was not a directive from the Ministry of Magic, but rather an instinctual drive. Yet this very instinct would lead to their demise at Blake's hands. The Dementors, having long been accustomed to the Ministry of Magic's wizards, held a simple belief. Wizards could only repel them, not kill them, with the sole exception being the Patronus charm. This belief emboldened them, as they thought themselves invincible against any who lacked the ability to conjure a Patronus. However, their confidence was their downfall when they encountered Blake. Unlike any wizard they had faced before, Blake did not hesitate. With a swift motion, he conjured at a massive fire dragon from his wand. its orange flames engulfing 10 Dementors in an instant. The remaining Dementors, sensing a lethal threat in the flames, fled in terror. But Blake was not done. His heart surged with violent emotion as he prepared to cast another spell, determined to eradicate the remaining Dementors. Meanwhile, inside the train, Jean Ping and Lupin were just beginning to grasp the situation. Lupin, in particular, was taken aback by the sheer power and uncontrollable rage in Blake's eyes. He realized that he was incapable of reining in Blake's fury. As Blake prepared to cast the Patronus charm, Lupin feared the worst. Without happiness, a Patronus could not be conjured, or so he thought. To Lupin's astonishment, Blake summoned a remarkably solid and powerful Patronus in the form of a pure white phoenix. This defied all expectations, given Blake's current state of mind. The Patronus repelled the Dementors with ease, its white light driving them out of the carriage and away from the train. The oppressive atmosphere of despair and cold vanished as if ice melting under the warm sun. The passengers, curious about the source of their sudden relief, peered out of the windows. While many could not see Blake from their vantage points, those in the nearest carriages witnessed the entire spectacle. Blake's actions not only saved the students from the Dementors' grasp, but also challenged the long-held beliefs about the limitations of magic and emotion. His ability to cast such a powerful Patronus under the influence of rage rather than happiness suggested that there was more to magic than traditional wisdom dictated. Lupin observed the Dementors in shock, noting a peculiar detail. Instead of fleeing, the Dementors seemed to be corralled, unable to escape. It dawned on him that it wasn't their lack of desire to flee, rather, a formidable phoenix was herding them back each time they attempted to escape. Moreover, the phoenix's flying range was gradually decreasing, effectively tightening the noose around the Dementors. Lupin's eyes narrowed as he pieced together Blake's strategy. He was driving the Dementors into a tight group for a specific purpose. As expected, once the Dementors were sufficiently gathered, a fire dragon, conjured from Googleye's fairy fire, descended upon them. In mere seconds, the Dementors that had been menacingly flying around were reduced to ashes. The carriage, previously chilled to the bone by the Dementors' presence, now basked in the warmth of the fairy fire. Once the threat was neutralized, Blake dismissed the fire dragon, but kept the phoenix, summoned by the Patronus charm, active. He directed the phoenix to fly back and forth within the carriage. The phoenix's melodious song filled the air, dissipating the gloom that had settled over the young wizards' hearts from the Dementors' joy-sapping presence. It was akin to basking in the warmth of winter sunshine, a comforting and rejuvenating experience. With the ordeal over, Blake recalled his Patronus and surveyed the surroundings from the roof of the carriage. Satisfied that no Dementors lingered, he leaped down and re-entered the Hogwarts Express through the damaged section. All eyes turned to Blake as he made his descent. Moments later, applause broke out, led by Cassandra. The applause quickly swelled into enthusiastic cheers, a testament to Blake's heroic actions. Word of how Blake had ventured onto the carriage roof to cast the Patronus charm and vanquish the Dementors had spread rapidly through the Hogwarts Express. The passengers were well aware of the bravery he had shown on their behalf. Amidst the clear and warm applause, Blake was jolted back to reality from his intense emotions. The system notifications chimed in his mind, acknowledging the shock, gratitude, and pleasant emotions his actions had elicited, and rewarding him with a treasure chest. Although the emotional turmoil caused by the Dementors meant the treasure chest wasn't of the highest quality, it was an unexpected boon for Blake, who had initially intended only to drive the Dementors away with his Patronus charm. The situation had escalated beyond his expectations, leading to the Dementors' destruction. "Well done, Blake," Lupin said, relief evident in his voice as he patted Blake on the shoulder. Blake's actions had taken him by surprise, not only in their effectiveness but in the sheer power displayed. What caught Lupin's attention most, however, was Blake's Patronus, a phoenix. It was a revelation that made him wonder if Blake had a direct connection to Dumbledore himself, given the rarity of such a Patronus. Blake, ruffling his messy hair, couldn't help but feel he had stirred up trouble once again. Yet his friends were quick to offer their support. "We'll stand by you, Blake," Cassandra declared, ready to defend him. "You did nothing wrong, Blake. You saved us and Harry from those creatures. No one will fault you for that," Hermione added, her words carrying a mix of reassurance and concern. Blake paused, a realization dawning on him. "Oh, you don't understand, Hermione. Those weren't just any creatures. They were Azkaban's jailers, employees of the Ministry of Magic." "Wait, did you just say Harry?" In the midst of Blake's speech, he suddenly remembered Harry was still sprawled on the ground. Swiftly, everyone rallied to help Harry to his feet and settled him into a chair. As the train resumed its slow journey, Blake administered a small pill to Harry. Moments later, Harry coughed, blinking back to consciousness. "What happened?" he asked, noting the train's steady movement and the darkness that had enveloped the sky outside the window. Harry's cheeks flushed with embarrassment upon hearing that he had been the only one on the Hogwarts Express to faint at the sight of the creatures, a fact that deeply mortified him. "That was a Dementor, a creature of darkness," Lupin explained, his voice steady and informative. "Dementors drain peace, happiness, and every good memory from those around them. If given the chance, they will feed on you for as long as they can, leaving you soulless and malevolent, haunted only by your worst experiences. Harry, your suffering is greater than anyone else's here, which is why you were overwhelmed in the presence of the Dementors. It's not your fault," Lupin added, trying to alleviate Harry's shame. Harry sighed, somewhat comforted by Lupin's words, yet the embarrassment lingered. Ron interjected, "No wonder. I felt a wave of despair wash over me." "Indeed, only the Patronus charm can repel them," Lupin continued, turning his attention to Blake, who was quietly handling her wand. "Blake, you are the youngest wizard capable of conjuring such a powerful Patronus. That's an achievement to be proud of." "Thank you for your kind words, Professor Lupin," Blake replied, managing a weak smile. "Don't fret, Blake. The Dementor was after you, but your resistance was commendable. I'll vouch for you," Lupin reassured, mistaking Blake's concern for fear of repercussions from the encounter. "It's not that. I'm not worried about myself. I just don't want to cause any trouble for Professor Dumbledore," Blake responded, her loyalty evident. Lupin couldn't help but admire Blake's selflessness, thinking first of others, particularly her, father figure. This thought, however, reignited his confusion. The evidence was undeniable. Only someone with a connection to the Dumbledore lineage could conjure a phoenix as their Patronus. Chapter 401, Lupin. Professor Dumbledore, who is Blake's mother. "Why haven't those Dementors returned yet?" asked an Auror, his face marred by pockmarks as he stretched his limbs. "They must be gorging themselves before they return," replied another Auror, his nose reddened, standing beside the first with an expressionless face. Letting the Dementors search was a risky move. They were bound to absorb the happiness from the young wizards they encountered. However, the Aurors believed the Dementors would exercise some restraint and not harm the children. After all, this operation was under Minister Fudge's orders. "That's odd. Even after a hearty feast, they should have returned by now," the pockmarked Auror mused, a frown creasing his brow. "Could something have gone wrong?" the red-nosed Auror wondered aloud. "No, these Dementors are malevolent but not brainless. They know not to overstep certain boundaries, especially with young wizards," the first Auror reassured. "Then we wait," they concluded, settling into an uneasy vigil. The Hogwarts Express finally arrived safely at its destination, much to the relief of everyone on board. Even the roof of the carriage, which had been blown off by Blake's explosive spell, was swiftly repaired by Professor Lupin. As the train pulled into the platform, the students inside heaved sighs of relief, their fears of a second Dementor attack dissipating. Especially reassuring was the sight of Dumbledore, with his distinctive long beard, waiting on the platform. His presence signaled safety and comfort to the students. "When we encountered the Dementors, I sent an owl to inform the school," Professor Lupin explained. "It's a significant event when students face such an attack." "First years, this way," Hagrid's booming voice called out, lantern in hand, guiding the new students off the train. With the first years gone, the platform thinned out. Blake, seeing Dumbledore, attempted to steer clear of him, but Dumbledore's keen eyes caught him. "Blake, come here," Dumbledore called, his voice gentle yet firm. Blake sighed, signaling Hermione and Sandra to proceed to the castle without him. then slowly made his way to Dumbledore. He wasn't worried about Dumbledore reprimanding him for the Dementors. If anything, Dumbledore would shield him from the Ministry's potential backlash. However, Blake was concerned that Dumbledore might disapprove of his actions, fearing they stemmed from a loss of control. Approaching Dumbledore felt like an eternity for Blake. By the time he reached him, Professor Lupin had already briefed Dumbledore on the incident. "Young man, why do you walk slower than I do?" Dumbledore teased, noticing Blake's reluctance. "Oh, I prefer taking my time," Blake responded, his tone listless. Dumbledore, sensing Blake's apprehension, quickly reassured him. "Professor Lupin has filled me in. You have no reason to worry about my reaction, Blake. You did well. You protected your classmates on the train. According to Lupin, if you hadn't bravely stood in front of Harry, he might have been harmed by a Dementor." Blake managed to smile, downplaying his heroics. "It was nothing. I just did what I could." Dumbledore's eyes twinkled with a mix of pride and concern as he regarded Blake. The conversation shifted subtly as Dumbledore seemed to ponder his next words carefully. Dumbledore placed his hand on Blake's shoulder, offering a comforting presence. "I understand you're still grappling with the aftermath of your actions, driven by a loss of emotional control," he began, his voice steady and reassuring. "But trust me, no one could remain unaffected after having their joy drained by a Dementor. And yet, it seems to me that you weren't entirely out of control, were you? I'm relieved to see that your anger was directed at the Dementors who harmed you. When it came to your classmates, you showed restraint. How can that be considered losing control?" "Cheer up, Blake." Blake was taken aback. He hadn't expected Dumbledore to address his emotional turmoil with such understanding and support. Before he could respond, Professor Lupin interjected, "I just witnessed. Blake's Patronus is a phoenix." Dumbledore's eyes twinkled. "Ah, yes, indeed." He glanced around before leaning in, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. "You might find this surprising, but Blake is actually my son." Lupin's expression turned incredulous at Dumbledore's revelation, his face a mix of surprise and confusion. It was one thing to suspect such a connection, but hearing it confirmed was another matter entirely. Blake observed Dumbledore's slightly flushed face, filled with pride. In that moment, he realized the depth of Dumbledore's affection for him. Unlike his approach with Tom Riddle, Dumbledore was willing to acknowledge Blake's flaws and work on addressing them rather than being defensive. "Who is Blake's mother? Would I know her?" Lupin couldn't contain his curiosity, his mind racing with possibilities. Dumbledore sighed, a hint of sadness in his voice. "It's a complicated story." He trusted Lupin, one of his closest confidants. Given Lupin's own unique circumstances as a werewolf and Blake's as an android, Dumbledore hoped sharing the truth would foster a deeper bond between them. The trio boarded a thestral-drawn carriage, which set off towards the castle. As they traveled, Dumbledore shared Blake's extraordinary background with Lupin, who listened in stunned silence. "There is no mother, only two fathers, one of whom is Grindelwald," Dumbledore explained, adding, "To avoid complications, we've decided he should use the surname Green at Hogwarts, a name given by Lady Marion, who raised him." Lupin nodded, understanding the need for discretion. The revelation of Blake's lineage could cause a media frenzy if discovered by the wrong people. Observing Blake, who had been quietly listening, Lupin felt a newfound respect and kinship. Blake's magical prowess and unique heritage set him apart, yet Lupin saw him as an ally, not an outcast. Their shared experience of being different created an unspoken bond between them. Meanwhile, at the Auror office, Alastor Moody was in the midst of a furious outburst. "You were supposed to keep an eye on those damned Dementors. Instead, they launched an attack on the students at Hogwarts, and you failed to notice," he bellowed at his subordinates. Moody, who had been considering retirement, found himself drawn back into action, motivated in part by Blake's innovative limb regeneration spell. With his limbs restored, Alastor Mad-Eye Moody shelved any thoughts of retirement. Now fully capable, he felt he could continue battling in the magical world for another decade. This prospect, however, was less than thrilling for the Aurors under his command. At the moment, two of these Aurors, one with a pockmarked face and the other with a red nose, stood before Moody, heads bowed in deference. Moody's reputation as a legendary Auror, with a long list of accomplishments, commanded respect. His temper was notorious. He was not one to make idle threats. The situation they found themselves in was indeed a result of their negligence. Thankfully, no tragedy occurred. Otherwise, Moody trailed off, his voice tinged with relief, yet underscored by a stern warning. The pockmarked Auror, voice trembling, tried to defend their actions. We didn't anticipate this. We've conducted searches before without issue. It never happened before, because you were lucky, Moody retorted, his anger palpable. You're unaware of the gravity of the situation. Harry Potter was nearly subjected to a Dementor's kiss. Had it not been for the timely intervention of the new Defense Against the Dark Arts professor, the consequences would have been dire. This incident could have led to repercussions for all of us, myself included, and possibly even the Minister for Magic. The mention of Harry Potter, the boy who lived, being in such peril sent shivers down the spines of the two Aurors. "Boss, where are those Dementors now?" the pockmarked Auror inquired, his face contorted with anger at the thought of the Dementors' disobedience. "You're thinking of settling scores with them?" Moody asked, his gaze sharp. "Yes, we should teach them a lesson to prevent a recurrence," the Auror replied. "None of those Dementors returned. They're all dead, obliterated," Moody revealed, shocking his subordinates. This was the first they had heard of Dementors being killable. "How did they die? Was it Dumbledore?" they asked, unable to fathom who else could eliminate over 30 Dementors, creatures nearly invincible without the use of a Patronus charm. "Not Dumbledore," Moody clarified. "He could at best have driven them away with a Patronus charm. No, they crossed paths with someone far more formidable." "Who, boss? Do you know?" they pressed, curiosity piqued. Moody's expression turned peculiar as he mentioned, "A young wizard." "A young wizard? Are you serious?" The Aurors were incredulous. "That young wizard is the reason I have my limbs back. He developed a regenerative treatment for severed limbs. He's my benefactor, and you will not trouble him," Moody stated firmly, leaving no room for argument. The Aurors were taken aback, now understanding the gravity of Moody's recovery and the young wizard's role in it. "What's his name?" they asked. "Blake Green," Moody replied, a hint of admiration in his voice. "He's an extraordinary talent, capable of manipulating Gubraithian fire at such a young age. I doubt even Dumbledore is aware of his full potential." Meanwhile, Blake Green pushed open the doors to Hogwarts, pausing as he noticed the broken door bolt on the ground. "Well, Mr. Green, the new students haven't arrived yet, so I haven't had the chance to remove the door bolt," he mused, contemplating the implications of his strength and the unforeseen consequences of his actions. The tradition at Hogwarts was clear. Filch would wait for the arrival of the new students and the knock of Hagrid before opening the Great Hall's doors. Professor McGonagall would then welcome the newcomers inside. However, today's events took an unexpected turn. Mr. Filch glanced towards Dumbledore, who stood beside Blake, both appearing somewhat embarrassed. Filch wondered if he would be reprimanded for hastily securing the door. After a moment of silence that enveloped the room, Dumbledore finally spoke, breaking the awkward quiet. "Blake, you must learn to control your strength," he said, his voice calm yet firm. Blake, looking puzzled, replied, Okay, Professor." He was trying to piece together his actions. It seemed his emotions had gotten the better of him, inadvertently revealing a surge in his physical strength. The room was filled with astonishment. With a mere push, Blake had snapped a door bolt as thick as a thigh. The students and Professor Lupin exchanged bewildered looks, questioning whether Blake was more machine than human. Dumbledore, maintaining his composure, signaled Mr. Filch to secure the door once more. With a flick of his wand, he cast a restoration charm, and the bolt was magically repaired, as if nothing had happened. "Are you hungry? Please return to your seat. We'll join you shortly," Dumbledore suggested, addressing Blake with a gentle smile. "Okay, Professor." Blake responded, turning to make his way back to the Hufflepuff table. As he walked, a sudden burst of warm applause and cheers filled the hall. The students were not only applauding Blake's unexpected display of strength, but also celebrating his commendable actions on the train. The applause was more enthusiastic this time, fueled by the stories that had spread among the students. "Good job, Blake. And I mean the deadbolt." But of course, what you did on the train was impressive too, Fred exclaimed, his voice filled with admiration. Merlin's beard. I've been here for years and never once thought to test my strength against the door bolt. George added, his tone matching his twins' enthusiasm. Mr. Filch, observing the twins' antics, could feel his patience wearing thin. Yet something seemed to spark a memory, prompting him to retrieve a card adorned with ancient runes. With a decisive motion, he affixed it to the repaired door bolt. The card merged into the bolt seamlessly, vanishing without a trace, leaving the students to wonder at the magic that protected the doors of Hogwarts. Chapter 402, Evolution, the Physical Magician. Amidst the applause, Blake was ushered over by a young wizard from Hufflepuff. Cedric immediately invited Blake to sit next to him. Surveying his surroundings, Blake found himself seated between Cedric on his left and the imposing figure of big black brother Bob on his right. Directly opposite him sat his dear little sister Hannah. Blake sighed inwardly. He had hoped to sit next to someone more delicate and fragrant. Suddenly, a loud banging echoed through the hall, signaling Hagrid's arrival at the castle with the new students. Filch hurried over, first retrieving a card that had been inserted into the door, then unbolting it. More than 10 minutes later, Professor McGonagall entered with the anxious-looking freshman. Filch secured the door once more and placed the card atop it. Blake noted this detail with interest. It seemed Filch was no longer a squib, yet he hadn't abandoned his passion for ancient runes. His skills had evidently improved, a fact that didn't escape Blake's notice. Filch, catching Blake's gaze, bowed slightly in acknowledgement. Blake nodded in response, appreciating the kind of dedication Filch showed. The Sorting Hat had just concluded its annual song, and the sorting ceremony commenced. One by one, the new students donned the sorting hat and were assigned to their respective houses. Following the ceremony, Professor Dumbledore took the stage to introduce the new Defense Against the Dark Arts professor, Remus John Lupin. Snape's expression darkened at the mention of Lupin, a direct descendant of Dumbledore, knowing well he couldn't rival him. The thought of brewing wolfsbane potion for Lupin every month further dampened his spirits. However, the mention of Lily brought a fleeting glimmer of warmth to his otherwise gloomy demeanor. After the introductions, Dumbledore wasted no time in commencing the feast. Blake, eyeing the spread of food, eagerly joined in. His appetite was unusually voracious, possibly a side effect of the significant growth spurt he'd experienced. His fellow Hufflepuff students soon found themselves edged away by Blake's insatiable hunger, leaving him blissfully unaware of his excessive eating. It wasn't until Blake paused, sipping a glass of honey water, that he noticed the mountain of empty plates before him. Concerned, he realized his appetite was abnormal. Blake pondered the possibility of his body having evolved, especially considering how effortlessly he had managed the door bolt earlier, a task that would have previously challenged him. This realization led him to suspect that his body's evolution might be tied to his emotional state, particularly the shift from positive to solely negative emotions. Curious yet cautious, Blake contemplated exploring this further, wary of the potential consequences of tampering with his own evolution. Sirius Black, transformed into a large black dog, stood on a hillside, gazing at the ancient castle of Hogwarts from a distance. With a sense of urgency, he turned and darted down another path. A thought crossed his mind, puzzling him. The Dementors, those vile creatures he had grown accustomed to evading, were nowhere to be seen. Could it be that the Ministry of Magic had finally given up on pursuing him? The notion was fleeting, as Sirius knew all too well the disgrace his escape from Azkaban represented to the Ministry and to Cornelius Fudge personally. There had to be another reason for the absence of the Dementors, but regardless, it was a welcome reprieve. Determined, Sirius set his sights on Hogsmeade, hoping to scavenge something to eat. His day had been long and fruitless, and his stomach growled in protest. Once he had addressed his hunger, he planned to sneak into Hogwarts. His target was clear: Peter Pettigrew, the traitor disguised as Scabbers, Ron Weasley's pet rat. Pettigrew's proximity to Harry Potter, who shared a dormitory with Ron in Gryffindor Tower, provided Sirius with a lead. The thought of confronting Pettigrew filled him with a cold resolve. Peter Pettigrew, are you ready to meet your end? He thought, baring his teeth menacingly. Meanwhile, in the dark confines of Ron's bedside, Scabbers awoke from yet another nightmare, his heart racing. Ever since the news of Sirius's escape had reached him, his nights had been plagued with visions of a black dog hunting him down. The recent search of the Hogwarts Express by Dementors only confirmed his fears. Sirius was drawing near. Panic-stricken, Pettigrew considered fleeing, but the thought of encountering the black dog outside the safety of Hogwarts paralyzed him. Ultimately, he resolved to hide within the castle, leveraging his knowledge of its secret passages. As Pettigrew attempted to make his escape from Ron's dormitory, he encountered a new set of problems. His animagus abilities seemed to be sealed, rendering him unable to transform and open the door. Furthermore, his body felt weak and poisoned, making any attempt at running or jumping excruciatingly painful. Trapped, he realized he couldn't even escape the dormitory. In the headmaster's office, Blake, feeling unwell, sought out Dumbledore's counsel. Aware of Blake's unique condition as an android created by a future version of himself, Dumbledore had taken a keen interest in his well-being. Blake's abnormal appetite had not gone unnoticed, and now, feeling dizzy from hunger, he had no choice but to confide in Dumbledore. "I noticed you ate quite a bit tonight," Dumbledore remarked, his tone grave. Blake nodded, admitting his persistent hunger. Dumbledore resolved to find a skilled and trustworthy healer to examine Blake, understanding the need for discretion given Blake's secret nature. "Blake, use your teleportation magic to find Dean Bohan," Blake said, glancing at the clock. It was already past 10 in the evening. "This is an emergency, Blake. Dean Bohan will understand. Besides, he'd prefer this to seeing a therapist," Dumbledore reassured him. Blake had developed a voracious appetite recently, preferring to satiate his hunger with large meals rather than seek therapy. He speculated that his body was undergoing some form of evolution, necessitating more energy. If Dumbledore hadn't noticed the changes, Blake planned to return to his nutritional potions for a solution. When Dean Bohan arrived at the headmaster's office, he was visibly perplexed, having been transported from the distant St. Bavaria. "Oh, Blake, what sorcery is this? I only saw a circle of Mars," Dean Bohan began, but Dumbledore cut him off. "Dean Bohan, now is not the time. We need you to examine Blake." "Is the boy ill?" Dean Bohan asked, concern etching his features. Blake's contributions to healing were well known, and the thought of him being unwell was alarming. After a thorough examination with his wand, Dean Bohan turned to Dumbledore, annoyance in his tone. "Albus, have you been starving the child? He's on the brink of fainting from hunger." Dumbledore, taken aback, asked, "Is it merely hunger?" "Of course. What else could it be?" Dean Bohan retorted, suspecting Dumbledore might have been punishing Blake by withholding food. "In truth, the amount he recently consumed would suffice for half of Hufflepuff," Dumbledore explained gravely. Dean Bohan, observing Blake's weakened state, insisted, "Regardless, he must eat immediately, or he will indeed faint from hunger, and use a nutritional potion. It will act faster than food." "Understood." Dumbledore summoned his Patronus, a white phoenix, to fetch Severus Snape with a nutritional potion. Meanwhile, Blake produced a nutritional potion he had intended for another occasion. Without hesitation, he opened the bottle and drank it in one go. Dean Bohan watched in astonishment. The potion's high concentration was evident from its color, and he typically advised diluting such potent potions with water. Drinking it straight from the bottle was unheard of. After consuming the potion, Blake felt a slight alleviation of his hunger. Moreover, he noticed a peculiar sensation. His muscles seemed to warm up, then tighten. As he drank a second the changes became more pronounced, not only to him but also to Dean Bohan and Dumbledore. Blake's muscles visibly expanded, resembling the scurrying of little mice beneath his skin. With each surge, his strength increased. Feeling his power grow, Blake became anxious. "No, if I continue to evolve like this, could I become a physical magician?" he wondered, contemplating the implications of his transformation. Chapter 403, Snape's Dismay at Potion Consumption. Snape observed the white phoenix dissipate with a scowl, his displeasure evident. After ensuring little Lily was asleep and entrusting her care to Mrs. Marianne, he hastened back to his office to gather a collection of nutritional potions. These potions were freshly brewed, replacing those previously commandeered by the insatiable Blake. Snape couldn't help but grumble internally about the situation, particularly Dumbledore's directive to supply as many potions as Blake required. Does he think Blake is a buffalo, capable of consuming endless amounts of nutritional potion? Snape mused, though he quickened his pace. He understood the gravity of the situation. Dumbledore wouldn't summon him so urgently without a significant reason. Upon reaching the headmaster's office, the gargoyle guardian moved aside without requiring a password, signaling the urgency. Snape ascended the spiral staircase swiftly, his black robe fluttering behind him like a shadow. The sight that greeted him was beyond belief. Blake was guzzling down a nutritional potion with a fervor that made it seem as though he was merely quenching his thirst with water. Snape's complexion turned a sickly shade of green at the sight. Is it even humanly possible to consume potions in such a manner? He thought, appalled. Aha, Severus, your timing couldn't be better. I've just finished the last bottle, Blake exclaimed, discarding the empty bottle carelessly. He then proceeded to take another from Snape, opening it and tilting his head back to drink with such force that the bottle nearly shattered, eliciting a sharp intake of breath from Snape. Snape turned to Dumbledore and Bohan, who were observing Blake's potion consumption with a resigned silence. Is there truly nothing to be done? He asked, incredulous. Dumbledore sighed. We're at our wits' end. How many more potions do you have? We must act quickly, or he might very well starve. Starve? With this amount of potion? Snape was astounded. He had never witnessed anyone consume nutritional potions with such voracity and still be at risk of starvation. These potions. Snape surveyed the room, noting the familiar bottles strewn about. A pang of distress hit him, not just for the wasted potions, but also for the abnormal situation. The amount he's consumed could sustain 100 people for a week, he lamented, realizing the severity of Blake's condition. Even werewolves, in their weakened state, required only a sip to rejuvenate. The potency of these potions was not to be underestimated. One more bottle, Blake requested, belching slightly. With a frown, Snape handed over the remaining potions, his curiosity piqued. What exactly is happening here? He wondered aloud. As Blake continued to drink, Dumbledore briefly explained the situation, touching upon Blake's background and the extraordinary circumstances that led to his current state. Snape, already familiar with some aspects of Blake's story, listened intently. The Dementors absorbed his positive emotions, leading to a catastrophic explosion of negative emotions and a subsequent transformation. Snape tried to grasp the concept, though the mention of biotechnology and the possibility of Blake's body being engineered by his future self added layers of complexity. I'm as clueless as you are, Blake admitted, setting down another empty bottle. His body's reaction to the potions was unprecedented, leaving more questions than answers. In this chapter, Snape's frustration and disbelief at Blake's potion consumption underscore the extraordinary circumstances surrounding Blake's condition. The urgency and gravity of the situation are palpable, with Dumbledore's involvement indicating the severity of the threat. As Snape grapples with the reality of Blake's needs and the implications of his unique condition, the narrative delves deeper into the mysteries of magic and science intertwined. The situation seems to be that my body is undergoing evolution. Evolution, I mused, though uncertain about the specific conditions my future self might have set for this body's evolution. However, my current physical state is indeed improving, I added. Snape frowned, skepticism evident in his voice. Are you certain this is a positive development? If you're going to require such copious amounts of magical potion with every meal from now on. The mere thought caused Snape's face to blanch. The idea of me consuming several months' worth of his potion reserves in a single meal was daunting. I can't possibly spend every day without sleep, working overtime to brew nutritional potions for you, and even that wouldn't suffice. No, it's just that I'm still in the process of evolving. Once the evolution concludes, my current physical deficiencies will be compensated for. I won't need to consume as much unless something else causes me to become extremely weak, I explained. Snape replied coldly, for instance, should you undergo another evolution? It seems you'll need to keep a large stock of nutritional potions on hand at all times, I remarked, unfazed by Snape's biting words. After downing another bottle of nutritional potion, I continued, You won't need to prepare such vast quantities of nutritional potion, because, after consuming so many, I've come up with an idea to improve them. Perhaps, with these improvements, we won't need as much. Had anyone else made such a claim, Snape would have unleashed his famously sharp tongue. But this was me, Blake, making the statement, and Snape dared not dismiss it lightly. "Ha! We'll see about that after you make your improvements," Snape sneered. "I've got an idea, Severus," I said, seizing the opportunity after finishing a bottle of potion. I spread a piece of parchment on the ground, and, rather than using a pen, fearing I might crush the one Hermione gave me due to my current lack of control over my hand strength, I opted for magic. With a tap of my finger, writing began to appear on the parchment automatically. Handing the parchment to Snape, I opened another bottle of nutritional potion, finally feeling satiated. Snape read the parchment with a critical eye. After a moment, he looked up, his expression betraying a mix of surprise and begrudging respect. Despite his vast experience, he had to admit the proposed recipe had a 99% chance of success. This little bastard does have a knack for potions, Snape thought, a twinge of jealousy creeping into his heart. It was infuriating how effortlessly I seemed to excel, not just in potions but in other subjects as well. Truly, not just an exceptional wizard, but almost unnaturally talented, he mused, struggling to maintain a neutral expression. It's passable, Snape remarked nonchalantly, though his emotions were an open book to me, thanks to the system. If you're truly shocked, you're welcome to express it, I teased. Shocked? Ha-ha! Snape scoffed. It's not me who will be drinking it. It's your formula. If it kills you, don't blame me, he said before turning to leave the headmaster's office, the formula clutched tightly in his hand. It was clear to everyone that he was off to brew the potion, though his pride prevented him from admitting his eagerness. Dean Bohan commented, "Blake, I've always known you were no ordinary individual. Your abilities confirm it." Dumbledore had previously shared my life story with Dean Bohan, further solidifying my reputation as someone with extraordinary capabilities. Upon realizing the necessity of medical attention, it became clear that concealing one's health from a therapist was not an option. Initially, Dean Bohan was taken aback, his mind reeling from the revelation. The concept of artificial humans, the idea that life could be synthetically created, was astonishing. Blake, feeling a mix of hesitation and vulnerability, broke the silence. "Dean Bohan, do you think less of me because one of my fathers is Grindelwald?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. Dean Bohan dismissed the notion with a wave of his hand. Grindelwald may have been a malevolent force, and his followers were no better. But one's origins don't define their character, he reassured Blake. You are not him. My feelings towards you are not shadowed by his deeds. Besides, you also carry Albus's legacy within you. Having lived through the era dominated by Grindelwald's terror, Dean Bohan had seen firsthand the devastation wrought by his actions. Many of his contemporaries had suffered. Yet, Dean Bohan chose to see the bigger picture, refusing to let Blake's lineage cloud his judgment. Blake's spirits lifted at the affirmation of trust. "I'm relieved to hear you say that," he said, a smile breaking across his face. "Do you think I'm feeling better now?" he inquired, noting that Dean Bohan had observed his ceased medication. "Indeed, it seems so," Blake replied, patting his stomach, which now felt satisfyingly full, and let out a small burp. He noticed his muscles tensing, a reminder of his immense strength that he had to constantly keep in check to avoid accidental destruction. Opting for a safer activity, Blake sat back down and began to manipulate a piece of magic-infused mithril in his hands. Within moments, the sharp-edged metal was effortlessly molded into a smooth ball, a testament to his extraordinary power. Dumbledore and Dean Bohan watched in awe, recognizing the sheer magnitude of Blake's strength. "I need to gauge my own strength," Blake explained, slightly embarrassed. "I fear accidentally injuring someone with a mere handshake." Dean Bohan couldn't help but respond with a mix of humor and concern. "With strength like yours, a handshake would indeed be more perilous than mere broken bones." Meanwhile, Snape marveled at a newly brewed nutritional potion, its clarity and potency far surpassing previous concoctions. Blake is a true genius, he thought, impressed by the efficiency and effectiveness of the recipe Blake had improved in under an hour. "Perhaps the future belongs to him," Snape mused, considering Blake's remarkable physical condition and the potential for an extended lifespan far beyond that of ordinary wizards. Recalling Blake's earlier attempt to recruit him, Snape pondered his options. For the sake of little Lily, he was willing to reconsider. Perhaps it's time to align with Blake, he thought, acknowledging the inevitable shift in the era. As Blake continued to fiddle with the mithril ball, now smooth and devoid of any fingerprints, Dean Bohan cast a specialized spell to assess his condition. The results left him astounded. "Blake, you're unlike anyone I've ever encountered," he exclaimed. "Your physical resilience, including all internal organs, is conservatively estimated to be over 30 times that of an average person." Blake absorbed this information, quietly reflecting on the sensation of his own evolution. It was a concept he had previously applied to magical creatures, never anticipating he would experience it firsthand. This revelation led him to connect the dots to his research on magical animal evolution, marking the beginning of a new understanding of his own transformation. Upon entering the school, Blake pondered whether Big Bear had evolved from a mere ordinary bear into a magical creature through his own efforts, utilizing the system and druidic magic. Now, Big Bear could even transform into a human form. This led Blake to a startling realization about his future self, who seemed to have integrated biological evolution technology with biotechnology and applied it to his own body. "Dean Bohan, does this mean I am now essentially a magical creature in human form?" Blake asked, a hint of resignation in his voice. "Yes, you could interpret it that way," Dean Bohan confirmed, retracting his wand from Blake's body. Further examination was unnecessary. With sufficient nutrition, Blake had transcended the physical capabilities of an ordinary human. Turning to Dumbledore, Blake requested, "Professor, may I conduct an experiment?" Dumbledore, visibly concerned, inquired, "What kind of experiment do you have in mind?" "Professor, I would like you to use a magic spell to attack me directly," Blake proposed earnestly. Dumbledore's brow furrowed in worry. He couldn't help but wonder if the magical potion had somehow impaired the boy's reasoning. Chapter 404. Blake, Cassandra, I'm a little angry right now. Dumbledore gazed at Dean Bohan, his expression one of mild exasperation mixed with curiosity. He was on the verge of inquiring whether Dean Bohan believed that excessive muscle development could potentially compromise one's intellectual capacity. Blake, catching the implication behind Dumbledore's look, responded with a hint of frustration. "Professor, my cognitive abilities are perfectly intact. I merely wished to conduct a test," Blake continued, his tone earnest. "I feel exceptionally vigorous at the moment and was curious to gauge the resilience of my physique." Dumbledore, however, was not convinced. "You're risking injury," he cautioned. Despite Blake's body being enhanced 30-fold, Dumbledore, with his vast experience, knew all too well that injury was still a possibility. From his perspective, such a test was utterly unnecessary and fraught with risk. Applying too much force could harm Blake, while too little would yield no useful data. "It's fine. Isn't the most esteemed healer in Europe right here beside us?" Blake said, turning to Dean Bohan with a charming smile. Dean Bohan, however, was quick to express his disapproval. "No," he exclaimed, finding the whole endeavor pointless. Even if the test proved Blake's body could withstand curses, it wouldn't change the fact that avoidance was always preferable in combat. Thus, the necessity of such a test was questionable, especially considering Dumbledore was the chosen examiner. Dumbledore added, "Even if you could withstand it, I cannot bring myself to attack you, Blake. It would be heartless to ask an old man to raise his wand against one of his few remaining kin." Blake's initial enthusiasm, fueled by his enhanced physical state, began to wane as he considered Dumbledore's words. Realizing the emotional weight of his request, he apologized. "Sorry, Professor. I got carried away and failed to consider your feelings." "It's all right, Blake," Dumbledore reassured him. "In my youth, I might have been just as eager." The conversation was interrupted by the sound of the office door opening once more. Snape entered, holding a bottle of nutritional potion of exceptional clarity and concentration. Dean Bohan immediately recognized it as a top-tier concoction. "Severus, your efficiency never ceases to amaze," Blake complimented, examining the potion with approval. "You truly are a master potion brewer to craft such a high-quality potion so swiftly." Snape, however, found Blake's praise somewhat ironic, given that the improved formula for the potion had been Blake's own contribution. Moreover, Snape was not one to be swayed by flattery, especially when it came to financial matters. The total cost for materials and labor is 700 gold galleons. I'll waive the labor charge, so you owe me 500 gold galleons, Snape stated, extending his hand expectantly. Blake, attempting to deflect the conversation from money, playfully pushed Snape's hand away, causing Dean Bohun to watch in alarm, relieved that Snape's hand remained intact despite Blake's newfound strength. Snape, undeterred, extended his hand again, his tone laced with sarcasm. "Oh, so now we're sentimental about money?" Blake's patience began to wear thin. "Really, Severus, if it's money you want to discuss, then let's settle this." "Settle the score with you again," Blake said, extending the potion bottle towards Dean Bohun. Dean Bohun, with a practiced eye, took the potion bottle and examined it meticulously. "Oh, a nutritional potion of this concentration and purity is invaluable to us healers," he exclaimed, marveling at the potion's quality. "With such purity, it's devoid of any impurities. In times of crisis, imagine how many lives this single bottle could save." "Dean, if I were to sell this formula to St. Mungo's, what would be your offer in galleons?" Blake inquired. "Really?" Dean Bohun nearly leapt with excitement at the prospect. After a moment of contemplation, he replied with a hint of regret. "The funds from St. Mungo's public accounts are allocated for specific uses. I can personally offer 50,000 gold galleons. If that's insufficient, I'm afraid I'll have to pass." He explained that he preferred to use his personal finances for acquiring new potion formulas, as the public accounts of St. Mungo's were earmarked for other purposes. Despite his willingness, 50,000 gold galleons was the extent of his capability. Over the years, Dean Bohun had realized the futility of hoarding wealth, choosing instead to invest most of his earnings back into St. Mungo's, leaving him with limited personal savings. Dumbledore commended, "You are indeed the most dedicated healer I've ever encountered, Bohun." Blake admired Dean Bohun's selflessness, having never witnessed anyone personally finance acquisitions for public benefit. "Dean, I merely inquired about the formula's value. I didn't say I intended to sell it to you." Dean Bohun's face fell, mistaking Blake's intentions and assuming his offer was too low. However, Blake quickly clarified, "What I mean is, I won't sell the formula to St. Mungo's. Instead, I'll donate it. I understand that the most valuable gifts are those given freely. A transaction ends once money changes hands. But by not accepting payment, what I gain is a significant favor from St. Mungo's, all for a recipe that took me mere minutes to refine. It's a worthwhile exchange." Dean Bohun was astounded, struggling to find words. "Is this, really, appropriate?" The idea of receiving a magic potion formula, valued over 50,000 gold galleons, for free was beyond his wildest dreams. Nutritional potions, despite seeming unprofitable, are essential for patients recovering from severe illnesses due to their easy absorption. The standard practice at St. Mungo's was to sell a diluted version to prevent incorrect dosages, meaning a single bottle of Blake's enhanced potion could yield even more. Unaware that the improved formula required fewer ingredients, Dean Bohun felt an overwhelming sense of unease at accepting such a generous gift without compensation. Blake then turned to Snape, who had paled at the conversation. With a smile, Blake offered his hand. "Severus, you've heard the formula's worth, at least 50,000 gold galleons. I won't raise the price for you. Just 5 gold galleons will suffice. See, I'm giving you a discount because I broke your bone. Otherwise, it could fetch 100,000 gold galleons." Snape felt a metaphorical pain, realizing the predicament of dealing with Blake, who had effectively declared him bankrupt with a single calculation. I won't buy the formula," Snape quickly responded, eager to distance himself from the transaction. Blake handed the parchment with the recipe back to Snape, whose lips had turned a shade paler. "This won't suffice. You've memorized the recipe. You could brew it in secret whenever you wish. Wouldn't that be a loss for me?" Blake's words triggered a frenzied announcement from the system, clearly indicating Snape's growing anger. Yet Blake remained unfazed. After all, wasn't it Snape who had initiated this confrontation? Snape turned to Dumbledore, his frustration evident. "Your son is blackmailing me. Do you not care?" Dumbledore, preoccupied with examining his elder wand, seemed to find a sudden interest in a peculiar growth on it, further infuriating Snape. "I've done your dirty work, Dumbledore, and this is how you repay me?" Caught under Snape's intense glare, Dumbledore felt compelled to intervene. "Ahem, Blake, perhaps we should let this matter go. I trust Severus will not disclose your formula. I believe in his integrity." Dumbledore inwardly sighed, thinking, "Severus, why did you have to provoke him? This is your own doing." "Fine. I, too, believe in Severus's integrity," Blake conceded, not truly intending to blackmail Snape. His goal was to earn a treasure chest and halt there, aiming for sustainable growth. Snape, exasperated, wondered if he was expected to express gratitude. "Excuse me," he muttered, hastily exiting the scene, fearing that if he Jared, Blake might strip him of everything, including his dignity. Later, in the dormitory, Blake lay on his bed, staring at the twisted dagger in his hand in shock. In a moment of determination, he had stabbed himself, only to find the blade bending upon contact with his skin. This incident confirmed Blake's suspicion that his physical body had undergone significant strengthening. The force he had applied was comparable to being struck by a bullet, yet his skin merely itched, leaving the dagger deformed. Reflecting on this, Blake realized his physical defenses were remarkably robust, though he was curious about his resistance to curses. Since Dumbledore had refused to assist in testing this, Blake decided to approach Cassandra the following day, knowing her to be less hesitant about such matters. Tossing the dagger back into the system warehouse, Blake settled down to sleep, waking up the next morning, feeling rejuvenated after just a few hours of rest. His appetite had normalized, a stark contrast to the previous day's insatiable hunger, which he attributed to the after-effects of his body's evolution. Determined to be prepared for any future needs, Blake planned to create a stockpile of enhanced nutritional potions, preferably in pill form, for ease of dosage and portability. The previous night's experience, feeling bloated from consuming too many liquid potions, reinforced his preference for pills. After breakfast, Blake confidently approached Cassandra at the Slytherin table, inviting her to join him. The sight of a Hufflepuff senior escorting a beautiful Slytherin away left the new Slytherin wizards in shock, their respect for Blake evident in their reluctance to even meet his gaze. A senior Slytherin, Malfoy, advised them in a grave tone, "Don't mess with that Hufflepuff." Blake stood among the freshmen, his presence commanding attention. "Remember, you must not provoke anyone named Blake, otherwise you'll face consequences at your own risk." His words left the newcomers in a state of shock. A thought crossed their minds. Since when did we Slytherins become so timid? What happened to the glory of Slytherin? And since when did we start fearing Hufflepuff, of all houses? In the room of requirement, the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. Cassandra, with a gleam in her eye, asked, "Are you sure you want me to hit you with my strongest spell?" Blake, determined to test the limits of his resilience, had already shed his school uniform, which had been transformed from his levitating cloak. "Yes, go ahead," he replied, bracing himself. Cassandra's excitement was palpable. "Then here I come!" she exclaimed. Blake couldn't help but marvel at her eagerness to strike him. He thought to himself how different she was from Hermione, who would have been concerned about causing harm. Suddenly, a powerful spell was unleashed even before Blake could signal the start of their experiment. The wand was forcefully knocked out of Cassandra's hand by Blake's newly improved weather spell, leaving him slightly pale. "I hadn't even said start yet. Shouldn't we have begun with less intense spells?" he wondered, taken aback by her aggressive approach. Then, without warning, a massive bolt of lightning struck Blake directly on his bare chest. He felt a surge of numbness, but, to his surprise, no pain. This realization filled him with a sense of triumph. He had previously experienced the agony of Cassandra's weather spell before she had improved it. Now, her enhanced spell seemed to have no effect on him. After enduring the spell for a moment, Blake understood the extent of his body's resilience. He gestured to Cassandra that the test was over. She put away her wand, a mix of excitement and curiosity in her voice. "Blake, how can you be so unaffected by the spells? Do you still need to test more?" Blake asked, noticing her eagerness. "Well, no need," she replied, her excitement fading into disappointment. "You enjoyed hitting me, didn't you?" Blake inquired, a hint of darkness in his tone. No, no, Cassandra protests, Ted suddenly feeling guilty. As she attempted to leave, she found her hand caught in Blake's firm grip, unable to break free. You asked for it, she stammered, trying to justify her actions. But I didn't ask you to enjoy it so much, Blake retorted with a smile, his tone light yet carrying an edge of annoyance. Cassandra's panic grew as Blake moved closer. What are you going to do? She asked, her voice laced with fear. Blake's grin widened. Nothing much. I just feel a little angry now. Cassandra was left speechless, her emotions a mix of fear and regret as she realized the complexity of their interaction and the unexpected turn it had taken. Chapter 405, Harry and the Patronus Charm. Harry was feeling particularly downcast. The root of his unhappiness was none other than Draco Malfoy, who had been spreading rumors about Harry fainting from fear in the presence of Dementors. What made it worse was that the rumors were true. At that moment, not even the youngest students, fresh from their first day at Hogwarts, had succumbed to fainting. Yet, Harry Potter, the boy who lived, the one who defeated the Dark Lord, a symbol of bravery and a beacon of hope for the wizarding world, had been overwhelmed by the mere presence of those soul-sucking creatures. Now it seemed as though the entire school was whispering about it behind his back, making Harry acutely aware of the harsh realities of society. To add to his troubles, Colin Creevey, his most fervent admirer, was relentless in his pursuit of Harry. Colin's enthusiasm, once tolerable, now felt suffocating. He was always lurking around corners, camera at the ready, eager for photos, autographs, and interviews. This attention only served to amplify Harry's embarrassment, especially now when he was questioning his own reaction to the Dementors. Was feigning unconsciousness really a strategy akin to playing dead to avoid a bear attack? Harry couldn't help but wonder as he sought refuge from Colin's persistent inquiries. Exhausted and seeking solace, Harry found himself on a bench in a quiet corridor, only to spot Colin approaching with his camera. In a moment of desperation, Harry fled, hoping to escape the unwanted attention. His escape led him to the 8th floor, far from Colin's reach, where he could finally catch his breath. As he recovered, Harry noticed Cassandra of Slytherin approaching. Her appearance was disheveled, her makeup smeared, and her lips unusually red and swollen, which struck Harry as odd. Before he could ponder further, Cassandra hurried past him, clearly embarrassed. Soon after, Blake appeared, his demeanor contrasting sharply with Cassandra's. He approached Harry with a relaxed gait and a mysterious smile, exuding an aura of calm that reminded Harry of Dumbledore. Eager for support, Harry called out to Blake, who greeted him with a playful remark about Ron's rat. Harry, setting aside Blake's humor, expressed his need for help. Blake, ever perceptive, guessed that Harry's request was related to his fear of Dementors. Acknowledging the fear that even the bravest of hearts can harbor, Blake reassured Harry of his support, promising to assist him in overcoming his dread. This chapter, now refined, captures the essence of Harry's struggle with vulnerability and the importance of friendship in facing one's fears. Through improved clarity and enhanced descriptions, the narrative flows more smoothly, offering readers a deeper understanding of Harry's emotional journey and the dynamics of his relationships with his peers. "Can you really help me overcome this fear?" Harry asked in surprise. "Of course, my friend. Please come with me," Blake responded, leading the way with brisk steps. Harry hurried to keep up. "To cure your fear, we need to seek help from your father's good friend, Professor Lupin," Blake explained. "He's a professor, so his teaching methods are likely more effective than mine. I can only offer you some side assistance." Harry felt a twinge of disappointment upon realizing Blake wouldn't be the one to teach him directly. However, the thought of working with Professor Lupin, a close friend of his father, brought a sense of comfort and reassurance. Blake moved quickly, and Harry had to jog to keep pace. They arrived at Professor Lupin's office, which had replaced Lockhart's from the previous year. Blake knocked, and they were greeted by Lupin's slightly weary voice inviting them in. Upon entering, they saw Professor Lupin organizing his new space. The office had been cleared of Lockhart's extravagant belongings, replaced by Lupin's more modest items. Blake noted that the combined value of Lupin's possessions likely didn't match the worth of a single peacock tail feather quill that Lockhart had used. Ah, it's you, Lupin greeted them warmly. He explained his need to personalize his working environment, despite the house elves' efforts to tidy up. This is normal, Professor. Do you need help? Blake offered. Oh, of course, if you're free, Lupin replied, pleasantly surprised. Harry watched as Blake eagerly began to help. Feeling awkward standing idle, Harry joined in, though he was astounded by Blake's strength. A cabinet Harry couldn't budge was effortlessly lifted by Blake with one hand. Thanks to Blake's formidable assistance, they quickly rearranged the office without resorting to magic. Lupin expressed his gratitude, offering them sweet pumpkin juice, which delighted Blake, who preferred it over tea. So, what brings you here? Lupin inquired, knowing their visit wasn't solely for interior decorating. Harry wants to overcome his fear of facing Dementors, Blake said succinctly. Fainting is the worst outcome when encountering them, so we're hoping you can help him. Lupin looked at Harry with a mix of understanding and pity. It's not a lack of courage that causes you to faint, Harry. It's because you have more fear and negative emotions than most, which overwhelm you when the Dementors draw out your positive emotions, he explained. Can you help me, Professor Lupin? Harry asked, hopeful. Of course, Harry. How could I refuse? Lupin responded warmly, moved by the request from the child of his dear friends. The solution is the Patronus charm. It's the only way to face Dementors without fear. Harry, unfamiliar with the Patronus charm due to fainting during its previous use by Blake, listened intently. Yes, the Patronus charm. However, it's a very advanced spell, and I'm not certain you're ready to learn it, Lupin admitted, concerned about the challenge it posed for someone Harry's age. Despite the difficulty, the determination to overcome his fear, and the support from both Blake and Professor Lupin filled Harry with a newfound resolve to master the Patronus charm, no matter how advanced it might be. Magic, of course, is a complex field, with exceptions like Blake who seem to transcend the usual limitations. I want to ask, how does the Patronus charm work? Harry inquired, his confusion evident. Lupin raised his wand, hesitated, and then lowered it again. He was reluctant for Harry to see his Patronus, fearing the revelation of his werewolf nature. However, he glanced at Blake for assistance, who understood Lupin's concern. Blake knew that Lupin was worried, but he also believed that Harry, having been raised in a Muggle family, lacked the common prejudice against werewolves that was prevalent among wizards. Thus, Blake didn't press Lupin further. Instead, he effortlessly conjured a pure white phoenix that soared gracefully around the ceiling of Lupin's spacious office. Harry's eyes widened in awe at the sight. Look, this is a Patronus. Everyone's Patronus is unique, Lupin explained, delving into the intricacies of the Patronus charm, including the spell and casting technique. Meanwhile, Blake sat quietly, sipping pumpkin juice, his presence still necessary, as he and Harry had yet to uncover a treasure chest they were after. Blake had some ideas on how to retrieve it, but was momentarily distracted by Harry's struggle with the Patronus charm. Harry was disheartened, finding the charm exceedingly difficult, especially since he couldn't recall a memory joyful enough to fuel the spell. Despite his efforts, he made no progress, which led Lupin to halt the practice, noticing Harry's fatigue and frustration. Professor, am I too stupid? Harry asked, feeling inadequate compared to Blake's seemingly effortless magic. No, Harry, don't underestimate yourself. This is an advanced spell, not easily mastered, Lupin reassured him, suggesting that perhaps a bit of pressure could help Harry break through his current barrier. He thought of the boggart in the teacher's common room, which could mimic a Dementor, providing the necessary pressure without the danger of a real Dementor. Suddenly, Blake, who had been observing quietly, chimed in with a suggestion, piquing Lupin's interest with his reputation for innovative solutions. Harry, do you feel you lack joyful memories to activate the Patronus charm? Blake inquired. Yes, Harry admitted, his recent encounters with Dementors and social setbacks leaving him drained of positive energy. Blake, however, was impatient to wait days for Harry's mood to improve, seeing an opportunity to obtain the treasure chest sooner. He proposed a more immediate solution, leveraging his unique perspective and resources. Harry looked at Blake, hopeful for a breakthrough that could not only help him master the Patronus charm, but also uncover the treasures they sought. Hope flickered across Harry's face as he asked, Do you really have a way? Or do you possess a special skill? Can you cast the Patronus charm without needing to recall a happy memory? Blake indeed had that ability, but it was tied to the magic of love, a concept Harry was yet to fully grasp. I don't possess any special skills per se, Blake replied thoughtfully, but I might know of a way to make you feel happier. A way to make me happier? Harry echoed, intrigued. Yes, tell me, Harry, do you enjoy learning magic with Professor Lupin? Of course, Harry responded without hesitation. Why do you ask? Because, Blake continued, Professor Lupin was a close friend of your parents. When you're learning from him and talking to him, do you feel a bit closer to your parents? Harry found himself opening up. Yes, I do. I've been without my parents since I was a baby, and I'll never see them again. Anything or anyone connected to them is incredibly precious to me, especially someone who was a close friend of theirs. Lupin, who had been listening, sighed and gently patted Harry's shoulder in a comforting gesture. So if your parents were to teach you the Patronus charm themselves, you'd be even happier, wouldn't you? Blake asked, a smile playing on his lips. You, Blake, you know that's impossible. My parents, they're gone. There's no way they could. Harry's voice trailed off, a mix of anger and sadness in his tone. The suggestion seemed like a cruel joke. Impossible? That might not be strictly true, Blake countered, shaking his head slightly at the disbelief in Harry's eyes. You see, what if I told you I'm actually a necromancer? A necromancer? Harry repeated, confusion and curiosity mingling in his expression. Yes. Didn't Professor Dumbledore tell you? Oh, it seems like it's been overlooked for quite some time. Blake's revelation hung in the air, challenging everything Harry thought he knew about magic and the possibilities it held. The idea that he might, in some way, be able to connect with his parents again was both astonishing and deeply moving. Chapter 406, The Real Traitor. No, please, stop talking, Harry pleaded anxiously. Tell me quickly, what do you mean by the necromancer? He looked at Blake with a mixture of confusion, clearly intrigued by the term. Lupin shared Harry's amazement, knowing Blake was not one to speak without reason. Given Blake's reputation for following Dumbledore's guidance and his miraculous healing of the Longbottoms, who had been residents of St. Sowick Mungos for over a decade, Lupin was convinced Blake's words held weight. The necromancer, as the name implies, possesses the ability to interact with the undead, Blake began, capturing their full attention. One of his skills includes the power to summon the dead back from the realm of the deceased, albeit briefly. I know you're wondering where I acquired such an ability, but it's complicated, Blake continued, noticing the curiosity in their eyes. What's important is that I can indeed summon Harry's parents. Blake, have you tested this ability before? Lupin inquired, his voice tinged with excitement. Indeed, I have. In fact, the first person I summoned was your mother, Harry, Blake revealed, turning to face him. My mother? When did you summon her? Harry asked, his voice rising with excitement. That was last year, shortly after I discovered this ability. I needed Professor Snape to do me a favor, so... Blake trailed off, noticing Harry's growing agitation. You summoned my mother in front of Snape, and you never told me about it. Harry was nearly beside himself with shock and disbelief. Lupin quickly intervened, placing a calming hand on Harry's shoulder. Harry, this type of magic must be incredibly challenging. If I'm not mistaken, the caster might have to pay a significant price. Blake must have had his reasons for keeping this from you, Lupin reasoned. Moreover, there must have been a compelling reason for him to involve Professor Snape. Harry took a moment to process Lupin's words, his initial excitement giving way to understanding. If the magic was as simple as it seemed, Blake would have shared it with him sooner. The realization that Blake might have had to pay a steep price for his silence made Harry reconsider his eagerness. Blake, overhearing their conversation, felt a twinge of guilt. The actual cost of the summoning was minimal, just a few raw chickens and some candles. Yet, he knew this wasn't the moment to reveal such trivial details. Ahem. Yes, there is indeed a price to pay, Blake conceded, following Lupin's lead. What's the price? Lupin pressed, concern evident in his voice. It's better that you don't know, Blake responded gravely. At that moment, Blake's system chimed in, detecting the genuine emotions from Lupin and Harry. Ding! 2 moving emotions detected. Congratulations to the host for obtaining 2 golden treasure chests. Touched by Blake's willingness to summon Harry's parents despite the supposed cost, Lupin and Harry were moved by his apparent self-sacrifice. Blake's actions promised to provide Harry with cherished memories and aid him in mastering the Patronus charm. "Blake, there's no need for this. I have another way to help Harry learn the Patronus charm," Lupin offered earnestly. "Blake, as much as I want to see my parents, I can't let you bear the cost on my behalf," Harry added, his sincerity palpable. Blake felt a pang of conscience. Revealing the true simplicity of the summoning now seemed inopportune. Suppressing the urge to confess, he adopted a stern demeanor. "Stop talking. I've made my decision," Blake declared with resolve. "If I have the ability to help and choose not to, I couldn't live with myself." Harry's eyes widened, deeply moved by Blake's determination. "Blake, you're truly," he began, but his words were lost to emotion. Blake's decision had sealed the matter, leaving an indelible mark on both Harry and Lupin. Despite the misunderstanding about the cost, Blake's readiness to help his friend spoke volumes about his character. "Emotions detected," announced the system. Congratulations to the host for obtaining 2 golden treasure chests. Blake felt a twinge of guilt. She hadn't intended any harm, yet the weight of her conscience was unexpectedly heavy. Struggling to compose herself, she noticed Harry and Lupin interpreting her struggle as a sign of a difficult decision. "If I had known, I wouldn't have asked for your help, Blake," Harry said, his voice filled with regret. The thought of Blake facing unforeseen consequences on his behalf was unsettling. Blake's mouth twitched in annoyance. "Harry, please stop crying. It's making me feel like I'm on my deathbed," she said, exasperated. Comforting a crying man was not something she was accustomed to, and it only served to irritate her further. "Let's just say that what seemed like a high price to pay in the past doesn't seem so daunting to me now," Blake explained, glancing at Lupin, who nodded in understanding. He had learned of Blake's physical transformation from Dumbledore and realized that Blake could now withstand the backlash of the powerful magic she was about to use. Harry, however, remained uneasy. "I still think this is a bad idea." "Enough with the worrying," Blake interjected. "Instead of fretting over this, focus on what you're going to say to your parents. Just so you know, I can't maintain the spell for very long." With that, Blake conjured a dense, gray mist in a corner of the office to obscure their actions. "I wouldn't normally resort to this, but we can't let others see that the price for this magic is merely a few raw chickens. It wouldn't look good," she added, half-jokingly. "It will take me a few minutes to prepare. You should use this time to think about what you want to say to James and Lily," Blake advised before stepping into the mist. Lupin and Harry, left to their thoughts, pondered their upcoming reunion with James and Lily, determined not to waste the opportunity Blake was providing at a significant cost. Inside the mist, Blake opened a dimensional door and arrived in the Hogwarts kitchen, where she greeted several house elves by name. With their respectful assistance, she collected many raw chickens and returned to her setup within the mist, all within a matter of minutes. Outside, Harry and Lupin waited patiently, their minds occupied with thoughts of their loved ones. Blake expertly arranged the magic circle and sacrificed a raw chicken to it. Recalling her previous summoning of Lily, she wondered if she should also summon James to address all their concerns in one go. Deciding it was the best course of action, she stepped out of the mist, feigning exhaustion. "Blake, are you okay?" Harry asked, concern evident in his voice. "I'm fine, just a bit tired," Blake reassured them, brushing off their concerns. "Are you ready?" Harry and Lupin nodded, their faces tense with anticipation. "All right, let's begin," Blake said, turning back to the mist. She began chanting a lengthy spell, her voice echoing through the office. A cold wind suddenly swept through the room, causing Harry to shiver as Blake initiated the spell to bridge the gap between the living and the departed. The air in Lupin's office grew cold as he uttered 2 names, James Potter, Lily Potter. A chill wind began to swirl, scattering the parchment on the desk. From the depths of the gray mist, the sound of footsteps approached, growing louder as if someone was walking through a long corridor. As the mist twisted and turned, 2 figures emerged, a man with untidy hair resembling Harry's, and a woman with long red hair and green eyes. Lupin and Harry felt a pang in their hearts at the sight, despite their initial skepticism about summoning the dead. Yet, Blake had indeed brought James and Lily back, if only for a moment. "James, Lily," Lupin greeted, moving forward as if to embrace his friends, only to remember the impossibility of physical contact with the spectral forms before him. James, momentarily forgetting his ethereal state, attempted to hug Lupin, only to pass through him. "Oh, yeah, I'm dead," he said, a note of sadness in his voice. Lily's gaze, however, was fixed solely on Harry. Recognizing her son, now much older than the baby she remembered, she approached him. "Mom?" Harry's voice was hoarse with emotion. Lily tried to touch his cheek, but her hand passed through him. "Harry! You are Harry!" James exclaimed, finally noticing the young man who bore such a striking resemblance to him. The scene was poignant, with the family separated by the barrier of life and death, unable to embrace or touch. Lupin's eyes welled with tears at the sight, and Blake stood quietly aside, listening to the system's announcements about emotional responses and rewards, his pocket now heavier with the raw chicken sacrifice needed for his next task. "Thank you, young man, for letting me see Harry all grown up," James said, gratitude evident in his voice. Lily added her thanks, mentioning their previous encounter at Severus Snape's place, which made James glance at her with a mix of emotions. Despite their past grievances, James acknowledged that everyone had moved on, even Snape. Blake modestly dismissed their thanks, suggesting they use the time to reminisce. His words deeply moved everyone present, though it seemed the spectral state of James and Lily prevented any system rewards for them. Blake then reminded Harry about learning the Patronus charm, a detail that puzzled James and Lily. Lupin quickly explained Harry's recent encounter with a Dementor and his desire to conquer his fear. "Dementors? Aren't those confined to Azkaban? Did Harry go there?" James asked, confusion and concern in his voice. The conversation shifted towards teaching Harry the Patronus charm, a powerful spell of protection fueled by positive memories and emotions. As they discussed the spell, the significance of family, love, and the strength drawn from them became evident, highlighting the enduring bond between Harry and his parents, even beyond the veil of death. James Potter's expression was a mix of confusion and concern as he addressed Remus Lupin's alarming news. "No, Sirius Black, the traitor who escaped from prison," Lupin corrected, his voice laced with worry. Upon hearing this, a slight smirk tugged at the corners of Blake's mouth, sensing the unfolding drama. James, upon processing Lupin's words, became visibly unsettled. "Wait, Remus, Sirius, betrayed us? How is that possible?" he asked, genuinely perplexed. Lupin, taken aback by the question, responded, "Isn't Sirius your secret keeper? Your home was safeguarded by the Fidelius charm. The only way your location could be revealed to Voldemort is if the secret keeper himself disclosed it." "Wait," James interjected, his voice heavy with a complex mix of emotions. "Our secret keeper wasn't Sirius." "What do you mean?" Lupin asked, his shock evident. James sighed, the weight of the past heavy in his voice. "Given Sirius's close ties to us, he was too obvious a choice. To throw off suspicion, Sirius and I decided to switch secret keepers." "Switched?" Lupin exclaimed, jumping to his feet. "To whom?" James's face was a portrait of regret and sorrow as he revealed, "Peter Pettigrew. Our new secret keeper was Peter Pettigrew." Lupin's reaction was one of utter disbelief. "What?" Chapter 4 Dumbledore. Did I just see a ghost? The revelation hit Lupin like a bolt of lightning. James's words resonated deeply, shaking him to his core. The change of the secret keeper meant that Sirius was not the traitor who had betrayed them. The real traitor was Peter Pettigrew, the one they had all overlooked. This meant that Sirius Black, who had been scorned and imprisoned in Azkaban for over a decade, was innocent. Why would you do this?" Lupin murmured, barely aware that he had voiced the question aloud. James explained, "Sirius proposed the idea. He felt he was too obvious a choice. Everyone knew of his close friendship with me, and his active participation in battles made him a prime target. He feared that if captured, the Death Eaters might use any means, such as the Dementor's kiss or Veritaserum, to extract the location of the safe house from him. So, he suggested Peter as the secret keeper. Peter was the least conspicuous among us, somewhat timid and cowardly. Sirius believed that no one would suspect him, so I agreed and made Peter the secret keeper." A heavy silence fell over the room as James concluded his explanation. It was true. No one, not even the Order of the Phoenix, could have predicted Peter as the secret keeper, let alone a Death Eater. However, what James and Sirius hadn't anticipated was that Peter had already turned traitor long before he was entrusted with the secret. By betraying them to Voldemort, who took the prophecy very seriously, Peter set in motion a chain of tragic events. Harry's face mirrored the shock felt by everyone in the room. The man he had despised and condemned was not a traitor but an innocent victim of a grave injustice. "Oh my God," Lupin whispered, the gravity of the situation dawning on him. Tears welled up in his eyes as he lamented, "If only I had been made the secret keeper instead of Peter, or if you had told me about the change, Sirius wouldn't have suffered such a terrible fate." James, after a moment of silence, apologized. "I'm sorry, Remus. At that time, Sirius and I had our doubts about you." You doubted me?" Lupin asked, stunned. James nodded, explaining that many werewolves had aligned themselves with Voldemort, which had sown seeds of doubt even among friends. The risk of betrayal, however slight, was too great to ignore. If Peter hadn't betrayed them, keeping Lupin in the dark might not have had such dire consequences. Yet no one could have predicted Peter's betrayal. "So, can you tell me what happened after I died?" James inquired, still concerned about the accusation against Sirius. Lupin recounted the events following James' death, explaining how everyone believed Sirius to be the traitor, since he was known as the secret keeper. The Aurors found Sirius on a Muggle street, where it appeared he had caused an explosion that killed several Muggles and supposedly Peter Pettigrew, leaving behind only a finger. Sirius was then imprisoned in Azkaban without a trial, where he remained for over 10 years until his recent escape. James was shocked. Sirius, imprisoned in Azkaban for more than 10 years? God, how he must have suffered. "Didn't he defend himself?" Lupin asked, shaking his head in disbelief. "He must be overwhelmed with guilt, believing he misplaced his trust, leading to our demise. He probably regrets changing the secret keeper," Lily speculated, her voice tinged with sadness. "In all of this, Sirius suffers the most," she continued. "He's been wrongfully accused. We need to clear his name with the Ministry of Magic and the public," James declared, his determination evident. "Yet, those Dementors are still hunting Sirius," Blake interjected, noticing the conversation had veered off course. "Isn't it peculiar? Sirius has been languishing in Azkaban for over a decade. Why would he choose now to escape? If he had truly lost all hope, this sudden breakout seems contradictory." Blake's observation prompted a moment of contemplative silence among the group. Lily then had a realization. He must have read something crucial, prompting his escape. Blake regarded Lily with silent admiration. Her quick wit had pinpointed the crux of the matter. "Let's ponder this later. The immediate concern is to inform Professor Dumbledore. With my help, you can remain in this world a bit longer. He will believe us," Blake suggested. Lupin agreed. "Yes, Harry, could you fetch Professor Dumbledore? His office is on the 8th floor, and the password is—" "That would take too long," Blake cut in. Lupin, catching on, suggested, "Right, you could send a message with your Patronus. Given your mastery of the Patronus charm, it should be straightforward." However, Blake had another idea. With a flick of his wrist, he conjured a dimensional door. "Why rely on traditional methods when you have a direct portal?" he quipped. At that moment, Dumbledore was in his office, engrossed in paperwork, when he heard the distinctive sound of the dimensional door. Curious, he approached the portal. "Blake, what's the matter?" Dumbledore inquired, stepping through the portal to find Lupin, Lily, James, and Blake waiting for him. The sight of Lily and James, seemingly back from the dead, took Dumbledore by surprise. Despite his vast experience, the sight caused his heart to skip a beat. "It's been a long time, Professor Dumbledore," James greeted, holding Lily's hand. Dumbledore, momentarily taken aback, quickly regained his composure. "Indeed. Could someone explain what exactly is happening here?" he asked, his voice steady despite the shock. Dumbledore's ability to quickly stabilize in the face of the extraordinary underscored why he was considered the greatest wizard of the century. Chapter 408, Was That Mouse Peter Pettigrew? Blake was present, and it seemed that this peculiar situation must have been his doing. It was logical to inquire about it from him. Well, here's the situation, Blake began. Harry needs to learn the Patronus charm, but there are too few memories that bring him joy. So I thought, if he could see his parents, whom he has never truly met, it might make him happier. Then I will. Blake briefly explained the current situation. Dumbledore's lips parted slightly, at a loss for words. To make Harry happy by summoning the ghosts of his parents? This unprecedented method seemed as straightforward as drinking a glass of honey water to Blake. When did you discover this new ability? Dumbledore asked, somewhat helplessly. New ability? No. Didn't you witness it that day in Nurmengard? Blake replied, surprised. You mean? Dumbledore suddenly realized. On the night when they created Little Lily, Blake had used the ashes of several lost souls to trade with unknown entities, receiving a new soul in exchange. Thinking about it now, it indeed involved magic related to the undead. Tell me honestly, do you have to pay a price for doing this? Dumbledore's primary concern was for Blake's well-being. Let's discuss that later. Whatever the price, it has already been paid. Now, we need to focus on understanding the whole situation while we still have time, Blake said. Dumbledore sighed and took a long look at Blake, then turned his gaze to James and Lily in their spectral forms. It's been a long time indeed, James. Lily. Dumbledore said. Blake mentioned that time is of the essence, so if you have anything to tell me, do it now. I'm not sure what price Blake will have to pay if this takes too long. Therefore, without wasting time, Dumbledore listened intently. Professor, the secret keeper of our safe house wasn't Sirius Black, but Peter Pettigrew. James didn't waste any time and went straight to the heart of the matter. What? You mean? Dumbledore's expression turned grave. Yes, Professor, the traitor wasn't Sirius all along, but Peter Pettigrew. Perhaps he had already turned against us before we changed the secret keeper to him, James explained. You might recall that during that time, the Order of the Phoenix suffered many losses. We all believed there was a traitor among us, but we hadn't identified them yet. At one point, Sirius suspected that the traitor might be Remus Lupin. Looking back, it's clear we were mistaken. The real traitor was Peter. Lupin stiffened slightly upon hearing this, his heart aching. Although he understood why his friend's suspicion was reasonable, being doubted by his best friend still saddened him. Sorry, Remus Lupin, James said apologetically. If only we had trusted you then. It's all in the past, isn't it, James? Lupin managed a forced smile. I understand. Dumbledore sighed. This means Sirius has been wrongfully imprisoned for more than 10 years. He frowned, deep in thought, his blue eyes shining with wisdom. Sirius hasn't attempted to escape from prison all these years, but now he suddenly decides to escape. That suggests something has drawn him out, something he couldn't ignore, Lupin added. Could it be Harry? As far as I know, he seems to be following Harry's trail now. Wait, when I ran away during the holidays, I met Sirius? Harry interjected, surprised. He remembered seeing pictures of a deranged Sirius in the newspapers, but didn't recall meeting anyone, especially not someone as distinctive as Sirius, except for the people on the night bus. Dumbledore and Lupin exchanged confused looks, waiting for an explanation. Lupin lowered his head, seemingly embarrassed. Professor, I have failed to meet your expectations. Actually, I've been hiding something from you, Lupin began, casting a glance at James, who nodded in encouragement. Remus John, now that we're here, there's no need to hold back, James urged. Sighing, Lupin continued, Yes, Professor, the truth is, whenever I fell ill each month, I would disappear for a while. James and the others quickly noticed something was off and eventually uncovered my secret. To keep me company during my illness, they all mastered the animagus transformation by our 5th year. When I was suffering, they would transform into animals to stay by my side, easing my pain, Lupin recounted, emotion evident in his voice. Despite being a despised werewolf, his friends didn't shun him. Instead, they devoted immense effort and took significant risks to learn a challenging magical skill, all to make him feel less alone. Even Peter Pettigrew, who later betrayed them, had taken that risk. Lupin couldn't help but be moved by their loyalty. Dumbledore's eyes sparkled with intrigue. So, all 3 of them became animagi? He asked. Yes, Professor, Lupin confirmed. James transformed into a stag, Peter Pettigrew into a mouse, and Sirius Black into a large black dog. Revealing this long-kept secret seemed to lift a weight off Lupin's shoulders. "A big black dog," Harry exclaimed, surprised. Though he didn't fully grasp Lupin's references to sickness and company, the mention of a big black dog caught his attention. He knew what an animagus was, thanks to Professor McGonagall, who could become a cat at will. The realization dawned on him that the big black dog he had encountered was Sirius. "It seems you figured it out," Lupin said, confirming Harry's suspicion. "Yes, the big black dog you saw was Sirius. I remember you mentioning it on the train. I was puzzled then why he didn't attack, but instead retreated after seeing you," Harry recalled. Lupin sighed. "Now it all makes sense. Sirius was never a traitor. He would never harm his godson." Harry was stunned. "Sirius is my godfather?" Hearing about a family member he never knew he had, Harry's emotions were a whirlwind of confusion and surprise. "Rat!" Dumbledore sighed, piecing everything together. "If I'm not mistaken, Peter Pettigrew is still alive." The room erupted in shock at Dumbledore's revelation. He explained, "Sirius, languishing in Azkaban, believed Peter was dead, living with the regret of supposedly killing his best friend. But discovering Peter was still alive transformed his regret into hatred. He couldn't forgive Peter's betrayal. This must be why Sirius was desperate to escape from Azkaban," Dumbledore concluded, his deduction impressing everyone, especially Blake, who couldn't help but admire Dumbledore's astuteness. Dumbledore, noticing Blake's look of appreciation, narrowed his eyes, wondering if Blake had known something all along. However, he chose not to dwell on it, and instead focused on the task at hand. "We need to find Sirius. Only then can we uncover the truth," Dumbledore stated. "And we mustn't forget Peter Pettigrew. If he's alive, he poses a significant danger." James inquired, "How can we help clear Sirius's name? Can I testify on his behalf?" Dumbledore shook his head. "No, Blake, The room fell silent, everyone aware of the sacrifices Blake had already made. They couldn't ask him to shoulder this burden again. Moreover, the possibility of allowing them to testify brings its own set of complications. Consider the skepticism with which the Ministry of Magic might view this unfamiliar form of spiritualism magic. They might dismiss it as mere trickery, not out of disbelief in the magic itself, but because acknowledging its validity would mean admitting to a grave injustice. Sirius Black was condemned to Azkaban without a trial. Now, with his escape making headlines and Minister Fudge's vehement denunciations in the Daily Prophet, admitting Sirius's innocence would tarnish the ministry's reputation. This is a burden the current administration, despite the errors of its predecessors, is unlikely to accept unless the evidence is irrefutable. "The only way to clear Sirius's name," Dumbledore declared, setting a definitive course, "is to capture Peter Pettigrew alive. This is crucial for Sirius's exoneration and Pettigrew's capture." Dumbledore continued, piecing together the recent events. "The Dementor's interception of the Hogwarts Express suggests that Sirius was tracking the train, likely in search of Pettigrew, who we now believe is hiding within Hogwarts. But how can we find him if he transforms into a mouse and vanishes into the castle?" Lupin interjected, his voice tinged with despair. "He knows the school and its secrets as well as any of us. Once he realizes we're searching for him, he could easily disappear into the hidden passages, eluding us indefinitely. Regardless, we must locate him and Sirius without delay," Dumbledore insisted. "Sirius is a fugitive, vulnerable to capture at any moment. If the Dementors reach him first, the consequences would be dire." Dumbledore's disdain for the Dementors was evident. He considered them utterly beyond control, a threat to any soul they encountered. The room fell silent once more, until Lily, with a heavy heart, addressed Blake. "Thank you for allowing me this time with my son, but we should return. Our presence here might only add to your burdens." Blake, reluctant to see them go, half-jokingly suggested they stay longer, revealing his pocket full of raw chickens as evidence of his preparedness. But Lily, ever considerate, insisted, "We cannot be selfish." Turning to Harry, her eyes softened. "My dear, I know you're suffering, but you must continue to be strong." "I am strong," Harry managed, his voice breaking. "I've always had to be." Lily smiled through her tears. "I'm so relieved to see that strength in you. Take care of yourself, Harry." James, attempting to ruffle Harry's hair and failing to make physical contact, added, "I'm proud to see you've grown into such a brave young man." Resigned, Blake began to chant the spell to send them back. As the familiar gray mist enveloped James and Lily, they shared one last look with Harry before disappearing into the ether. The sound of their footsteps faded until silence reigned, leaving Harry overwhelmed by emotion, tears streaming down his face. Seeing Harry in tears, Blake chose not to say anything this time. Instead, he silently walked into the gray fog, methodically cleared everything within it, and then dissipated the fog before leaving the scene with the tiger. Professor Lupin, you mentioned that Peter Pettigrew was blown to pieces, leaving behind only a finger, correct? Blake inquired. Well, that's what I believed at the time. However, it now seems more likely that he transformed into a mouse and escaped, Lupin explained. So even in his mouse form, he would still be missing a finger on one paw, right? Blake pressed on. Yes, that's correct, Lupin confirmed with a nod. Blake sighed deeply before revealing, I believe I've seen such a mouse. What? Where? Lupin asked, his voice laced with urgency. Actually, you've seen it too. Have you forgotten? Yesterday on the train, the mouse I had disinfected was named Scabbers. Didn't it have one paw missing a finger? Blake clarified, his words deliberate. An expression of utter astonishment crossed Lupin's face. Are you referring to the mouse you tricked? He asked, barely concealing his disbelief. Blake's revelation hinted at a deeper mystery, suggesting that the seemingly insignificant details they had overlooked might be pieces of a larger puzzle. Chapter 409, Ronald's Shocking Discovery. Scabbers is Peter Pettigrew? Harry exclaimed in disbelief. Ronald's pet mouse, Scabbers, was more than familiar to him. It was a creature Ronald cherished deeply. The revelation that Scabbers could actually be Peter Pettigrew, the man who betrayed Harry's parents, sent a shiver down Harry's spine. The thought of Ronald unknowingly cuddling with a man instead of a harmless mouse at night was both chilling and bizarre. Where is Scabbers now? Dumbledore inquired, his voice calm yet filled with urgency. Scabbers is Ronald's pet. He was with us until yesterday. Harry's voice trailed off as he recalled the surgery Blake performed, a procedure that now seemed to hold a much darker significance. The realization that the mouse was the very traitor responsible for his parents' demise brought a twisted sense of satisfaction to Harry. Well done, he thought, eager for Pettigrew to face justice. Ronald is likely in the dormitory, and so should Pettigrew, Harry said, his voice laced with determination. Dumbledore shared Harry's sentiment, turning to Blake for assistance. Blake's ability to teleport could prove invaluable in apprehending Pettigrew swiftly. Without hesitation, Blake conjured a dimensional gate, and they stepped through it, arriving in the Gryffindor dormitory. Ronald, unaware of the unfolding drama, was searching for something under his bed when Harry's sudden entrance startled him, causing him to bump his head. The pain and surprise were quickly overshadowed by the presence of Dumbledore, Professor Lupin, and Blake, who seemed curiously unimpressed by the dormitory's lack of comfort and snacks. Ronald, where's Scabbers? Dumbledore asked, cutting straight to the chase. Ronald's face fell. I can't find him. I think Hermione's cat, Crookshanks, might be responsible, he said, his voice tinged with distress. He explained how Crookshanks had been lurking around their dormitory door that morning, and afterward, Scabbers was nowhere to be found, leaving behind only a blood-stained nest. Dumbledore's frown deepened. The idea of an animagus allowing himself to be devoured was preposterous. Blake, examining the scene, quickly deduced that Pettigrew had staged his own disappearance to escape unnoticed, knowing Crookshanks, with its keen senses, would never harm him due to his true human nature. Ronald, confused by the conversation, struggled to grasp the gravity of the situation. Dumbledore, with a nod from Harry, began to unveil the truth to Ronald, preparing him for the shocking reality of Scabbers' true identity. The revelation would not only change Ronald's view of his beloved pet, but also draw them deeper into a web of deception and betrayal that had ensnared Harry's family for years. Overwhelmed with the weight of the news he had to deliver, Harry prepared himself to inform Ronald about the recent events. Being Ronald's close friend, he felt it was his responsibility to break the news. Meanwhile, Dumbledore and Lupin exchanged glances, each recognizing a shared concern in the other's eyes. The escape of Peter Pettigrew, known to them as Scabbers, posed a significant problem. If Scabbers is indeed Peter, then we cannot allow him to escape, Dumbledore stated gravely. "Professor Dumbledore, what actions will you take?" Lupin inquired, his voice laced with worry. Dumbledore contemplated their limited options. "I will instruct the school's ghosts to be vigilant," he decided. This measure, while desperate, would be effective if Peter remained in human form, as the ghosts and the portraits that lined Hogwarts' walls could keep watch. However, the challenge was significantly greater if Peter transformed into a rat. Given the abundance of rats within the castle, distinguishing Peter from the rest would be nearly impossible. Noticing Blake standing quietly to the side, Dumbledore felt a pang of hope. "Blake, do you have any ideas?" he asked, unable to hide his anticipation. "No," Blake replied succinctly, "at least not at the moment." Dumbledore sighed, feeling a sense of disappointment. He had grown to rely on Blake's remarkable abilities to solve problems that seemed insurmountable, yet he reminded himself that Blake was not all-knowing. "Come with me to the headmaster's office. Afterward, we'll visit St. Mungo's to have Dean Bohan examine you," Dumbledore suggested, concerned for Blake's well-being. Casting spells to summon the undead was no minor feat, and Dumbledore wanted to ensure it hadn't adversely affected Blake's health. "Okay, Professor," Blake agreed, his response showing a maturity beyond his years. Privately, Blake was confident he could locate Peter. He was aware of the Marauder's map in the possession of the Weasley twins, which could easily reveal Peter's whereabouts. However, Blake chose not to act immediately, preferring to wait for a more opportune moment. After leaving Dumbledore's office, Blake planned to track down Peter and apply several dark magic seals he had learned from Grindelwald, ensuring Peter couldn't escape again. Meanwhile, in the dormitory, Harry had finished recounting the events to Ronald. The revelation left Ronald in a state of shock and disbelief. For years, he had shared his life with Scabbers, confiding in him and even showing him affection, as he was Ronald's only pet in a family that often overlooked him. The realization that Scabbers was, in fact, a deceitful, middle-aged man masquerading as his pet rat was devastating. "Harry, please tell me you're joking," Ronald pleaded, his voice filled with sorrow. But the truth was undeniable, and Ronald was left to grapple with the harsh reality, his face contorted with anguish as he whispered, "No." Chapter 410, The Time-Closed Loop. The mystery of Ariana's life and death. Harry remained in the dormitory, offering solace to his distraught friend Ron. Lupin retreated to his office, while Blake had no choice but to accompany Dumbledore back to the headmaster's office. Upon their arrival, Dumbledore, unable to contain his concern, immediately grasped Blake's arm and inquired earnestly, "What price did you pay to use that magic? Are there any side effects?" Feeling the sincere worry in Dumbledore's grip, Blake was touched. Dumbledore genuinely cared about his well-being. "The cost wasn't as steep as they imagine," Blake confessed, knowing he could be honest with Dumbledore. "I let them believe the price was high to deter them from seeking me out to conjure the spirits of my departed friends in the future. Disturbing the dead is never wise. And the more I encounter the deceased, the more it hurts," Blake continued, his voice tinged with sorrow. "The dead cannot be brought back to life. Seeing them without being able to touch them only intensifies the living's anguish, possibly even driving them to madness. Isn't that what happened to the one who possessed the resurrection stone?" Dumbledore nodded in understanding, moved by Blake's rationale. "You've done well, Blake. Those who have passed must be let go if we are to move forward. But what is this not-so-big price you mentioned?" Blake produced 2 raw chickens from his pocket, suggesting, perhaps, a meal. He explained that roasting the chickens would suffice for him, a hearty eater. "That's all?" Dumbledore was astounded, noticing one of the chicken legs had turned gray. "It merely requires the life force of the sacrifice?" Touching the gray drumstick, Blake watched as it disintegrated into ash. "This chicken was a recent addition. Its vitality was only partially consumed. There's no harm to my own body." Dumbledore exhaled a sigh of relief, his gaze lingering on Blake with a mix of embarrassment and curiosity. Blake's abilities were shrouded in mystery, defying conventional understanding with their sudden emergence and inexplicable nature. "Professor, if there's no concern for my health, I'll take my leave," Blake stated, eager to depart for other pressing matters. "Wait," Dumbledore interjected, eyeing the raw chicken. "Do you have more of those?" Blake sheepishly admitted to having a few extra, acquired from the kitchen and technically property of Hogwarts. Dumbledore's response was a mix of amusement and mild reprimand. The school can spare a few chickens, but could you do me a favor? Blake's expression tensed, anticipating Dumbledore's request. You wish for me to summon Aunt Ariana, correct? Dumbledore, visibly troubled, nodded. I know I should let go, but I still need to apologize to her. It's the only way I can truly find peace. Sorry, Professor, I might not be able to do that, Blake replied, sensing Dumbledore's disappointment. Why? Has too much time passed to summon her? Dumbledore asked, concern lacing his voice. Blake clarified, it's not about the time. As long as she hasn't become a wandering ghost, I can bring her spirit back. However, the issue lies elsewhere. In the realm of shadows and silence, Blake shook his head, his voice tinged with a mixture of confusion and frustration. Then why can't you summon? Dumbledore inquired, his tone laced with curiosity. In truth, when I first discovered my ability, the initial undead I attempted to summon was my Aunt Ariana's spirit. However, despite numerous attempts, I've been unsuccessful, Blake confessed, his gaze lifting to meet Dumbledore's, a storm of emotions swirling within. Not in the realm of the dead? Does that imply? Dumbledore's face was a canvas of shock, anticipation, and a flicker of joy, though it quickly faded. Yes, it could mean that either she became a ghost, still wandering this world, or her soul was completely shattered by your spell, dissipating before it could even reach the realm of the dead, Blake analyzed with a careful, measured tone. Upon hearing the latter possibility, Dumbledore's hands trembled visibly, his grip tightening around his sleeves as a wave of panic washed over his features, an expression Blake noted Dumbledore had never shown before. After a moment, Dumbledore regained his composure, shaking his head in denial. No, it's impossible. I remember that day vividly. Although the spells we cast were lethal, none had the power to tear a soul apart. Well, then there's a third possibility, albeit a slim one, Blake continued, his voice steady. That Aunt Ariana is not dead. As Blake concluded, a system notification chimed in his mind, announcing a significant emotional reaction and rewarding him with a diamond treasure chest. Surprised and pleased by this unexpected gain, Blake couldn't help but feel a sense of achievement. Are you certain? What are the odds? Dumbledore asked, his grip on Blake's arm tightening, a testament to his strength and the intensity of his emotions. Blake internally admired Dumbledore's physical prowess, recognizing him as the most powerful wizard of the century. It hinges on the specifics of that day. If, as you recall, no soul-damaging spells were used, then if she had died, she would have either been summoned by the god of death to the realm of the dead, or remained in this world as a ghost. I personally doubt she chose to become a ghost, Blake mused. Ghosts in this world are souls with unresolved obsessions, unable to move on. If Ariana had become a ghost due to her death at the hands of Dumbledore or Grindelwald, she would have sought them out. Yet, neither Dumbledore nor Grindelwald has ever encountered her spirit. Thus, after ruling out all other possibilities, the only remaining explanation, no matter how improbable, must be the truth, Blake concluded. Professor, how did you confirm Aunt Ariana's death? Where was her body placed? Blake's inquiry seemed to reopen old wounds for Dumbledore, a pained expression crossing his face as he recalled the tragic events. After the altercation, we couldn't determine whose spell had struck Ariana. Grindelwald fled, and Aberforth and I found her, lifeless. Her body was cold, and she had ceased breathing, Dumbledore recounted, the memory as vivid and painful as an open wound. Colder. Dumbledore closed his eyes, tears streaming down his cheeks. His body shook with the weight of the memory, as if he were back on that tragic morning, holding Ariana's body as it grew colder in his arms. Then what happened? Blake pressed, understanding the importance of what came next. After that, Aberforth and I had a falling out, Dumbledore said, his voice tinged with regret as he touched the bridge of his crooked nose. He struck me with a fierce punch, then took Ariana's body and left Godric's Hollow. Blake's eyes narrowed, sensing the gravity of the situation. Did you never see Ariana's body again after that? Although Aberforth refused to see me again, I secretly followed him, Dumbledore admitted with a hint of self-mockery. My abilities were quite advanced at the time, and Aberforth didn't notice my presence. I watched as he purchased a coffin and laid Ariana to rest within it. "So, you witnessed Uncle Aberforth bury Aunt Ariana?" Blake inquired. Dumbledore nodded solemnly. Blake hesitated, then cautiously suggested, "If that's the case, there's only one way to verify whether Ariana is truly dead." "What way?" Dumbledore asked, still lost in his sorrow. "Do you remember where Aunt Ariana's grave is?" Blake asked gently. "You're not suggesting we exhume Ariana's grave?" Dumbledore's mood shifted to one of distress. No. If I were to disturb her grave." Dumbledore's conflict was palpable. On one hand, he yearned for closure. On the other, he feared desecrating Ariana's memory. "There's no need to dig, Professor," Blake reassured him. "Just take me to her grave, and I can ascertain the truth without disturbing the site." Blake possessed the eye of truth, which allowed him to see through the earth to the coffin below. Even without it, he could employ alchemy to create detection equipment similar to what he had provided for the fourth natural disaster. This realization sparked a thought in Dumbledore. "Do you suppose Ariana might have been visited by her future self?" "I do entertain that possibility, as I'm destined to undertake time travel in the future," Blake confirmed. "Who knows how many times and dimensions I've traversed. So I must investigate." "It's indeed a possibility," Dumbledore said, a flicker of hope in his voice. Yet he soon voiced another concern. "But if she is alive, why hasn't she come to me?" Blake sighed, sensing Dumbledore's agitation. "Because until today, you were unaware that Ariana might still be alive. To alter the past, events must align perfectly with present realities." He explained the necessity of maintaining consistency between the altered past and the known facts of the present to avoid paradoxes. Thus, Ariana couldn't have revealed herself to you before today without changing established facts. The implications of such a change are unpredictable. As for whether you can see Ariana after today, that remains to be seen, as the future is not yet written. Dumbledore, spurred into action by this conversation, made a swift decision. "I must take Blake to Ariana's grave." "Fawkes," he called, summoning his phoenix. "Since you've never been there, let Fawkes guide us." With that, Dumbledore prepared to confront the past, hopeful yet uncertain of what they might discover. Blake spoke with a hint of hesitation. I overlooked something." Dumbledore, puzzled, inquired, "What did you overlook?" "Do you happen to have a picture or portrait of Aunt Ariana?" Blake asked, his question catching Dumbledore off guard. The headmaster paused, considering the implications of Blake's request. He was reminded of Blake's unique magical ability, the Dimensional Gate. This spell allowed Blake to open a portal directly to the side of any person, provided he knew their name and appearance. The realization dawned on Dumbledore. If Ariana was still alive, and assuming she hadn't traversed through time and space to a different timeline, Blake could potentially open a portal directly to her location. This revelation held a mixture of hope and uncertainty, as the possibilities of reuniting with Ariana or uncovering truths long buried suddenly seemed within reach.